Welcome to a debate edition of the Whatever podcast. We're coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer-supported, heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs instead of super chatting, as YouTube takes a brutal 30% cut. That's streamlabs.com/whatever. Link is in the description. We do prioritize messages that are made via Streamlabs. To read a message is $99 and up, and we will pull those up in batches at various breaks throughout the debate. We're also live on Twitch right now. You can pull up another tab, go to twitch.tv/whatever, drop us a follow and a Prime sub if you have one. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two debaters. I'm joined today by Dyer. He's an author, comedian. He's the writer for the Sam Hyde Show and host of the Alex Jones Show TV. He has a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 years
just making sure. And 2 years. Just making sure Google is correct on that. He's a political and social commentator. Also joining us today is Kyla, or as she goes online, not so erudite. She has an undergraduate in psychology and a graduate diploma in psychometrics. She's a content creator, streamer, and is a political and social commentator. The topic of today's, excuse me. I'm still sick, guys. I'm getting over my illness, so my brain's operating at 10%. The topic of today's debate is feminism. You will each have a 5-minute opening statement, up to a 5-minute opening statement. The rest of the show is going to be open conversation with a few breaks for audience messages. At the end, you will each have up to a 5-minute closing statement. And Jay, we're going to have you give your opening statement first. Go ahead. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I take the position that feminism is absolutely destructive to society. The only healthy society that we can have is a patriarchal society. If you look at the history of the world, history of civilizations, we notice that the natural formation, the natural structure that all societies, almost across the board, maybe a few tribal societies have had a matriarchy, but most societies fall into some form of natural hierarchy. Hierarchy is found in nature. We see it in the animal kingdom. We see it in the manimal kingdom that we inhabit. And when we look through history, we find certain civilizations have flourished, particularly with a worldview or a philosophy that gives it its social cohesion. The longest running civilization in history, the most successful, the most prosperous, was Byzantium. Byzantium was an Orthodox Christian imperium dating back to the time of Constantine all the way up into the 1400s, when it fell to Islam due to liberalization, due to forms of modernization, certain economic open borders policy, shall we say, that led to the decline of Byzantium. So even in the most successful civilization in history, in Byzantium, we begin to notice that the liberalization of that society is what led to its decline and its eventual collapse, and even falling to Islam. If we fast forward to modernity, if we look at women's rights, or the idea of the first wave of feminism, feminism finds its origins in French revolutionary philosophy, which led to the first wave, I should say. French revolutionary philosophy with Mary Wollstonecraft and others posited the idea of absolute equality in society based around the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, all of which were revolutionary at the time and sought to overthrow not just the church and not just the state or the monarchy or a patriarchal society, but all society, all areas of life had to be revolutionized. Since that time, we've had second-wave feminism, we've had third-wave feminism. Third-wave feminism, interestingly, which not many people know, was actually funded by very wealthy, powerful oligarchical elites. In fact, in the Rockefellers' authorized biography, there's an entire chapter on Abby Rockefeller's funding of third-wave feminism and Cell 16, which was the most radical form of this. This is really what prepared the way for the absolute insane degeneracy that we see in today's society. Western civilization, in other words, could not have gotten to the point that we're at had we not had first, second, and third wave feminism preparing the way for the absolute and total revolution against all natural order, all biological order, and the notion of patriarchy itself. In fact, many of the famous feminists over the last several decades have openly said that in order to destroy Western civilization, they would have to destroy the masculine archetype, the patriarch. That is, God the Father had to be destroyed to make way for the rise of the goddess, etc. All the various things that we see attending to or accompanying the revolution that is feminism. If you look on my wall on X right now, you'll notice at the very top is an interview that the famous director Aaron Russo did with a friend of mine, Alex Jones, and in that interview they discuss Aaron Russo's interview with Nick Rockefeller. And Nick Rockefeller said that the greatest tool to revolutionize and control society was feminism. Modern feminism changed the landscape of getting women out of the house, into the workforce, quote, so that they could be taxed and that there would be less children, less families. So we have from one of the key elites from the Rockefeller family admitting that the purpose of this was to change society, reduce population, tie it into neoliberal economics, taxation on a mass scale for the population, and thus it has been an absolute disaster, and it has nothing to do with equality. It has to do with control, it has to do with social control, it's dystopian, it has to do with social dystopian control, putting us into a utilitarian technocratic society. And I would say that this is all an attempt, admittedly, if you go back to people like early feminists like Wollstonecraft or others throughout history, Alexander Kollontai of the Bolshevik Revolution, they all speak about this as intimately tied into not just sexual revolution, but the overthrow of masculinity, ultimately the overthrow of the idea of God the Father, the ultimate patriarch. And that's where we are today, is in a society that has adopted revolutionary philosophy that is ultimately anti-male, anti-biology, anti-reality, because they all go together. In other words, feminism cannot be divorced from the revolution against biology, the revolution against masculinity, the revolution against every area of life that is healthy, wholesome, and based around patriarchy.
All right, thank you for that, Jay. Kyla, would you like to give your opening statement now?
Sure. Mine isn't going to be nearly as long. But I was really interesting, and I basically would grant you lots of that stuff. I would essentially argue that feminism is not only a necessity, it's unavoidable. I think that's where society tends to go. I think women joining the workforce, while there's lots of cons with it, one of the biggest pros is the massive boost to GDP and just the competitiveness of every nation that includes women. And overall, I think feminism is broadly good for society, but I am sure that I would be happy to talk with you about a number of areas that I think have been harmful for society. I think feminism has been co-opted and often twisted. I think particularly in the third wave, we saw this by what I would call gender opportunists. And so when I think about feminism, I'm more interested in a feminism that is centralized around empowering women and promoting femininity. I think when you talk about egalitarianism, I think it's a really interesting concept, but I think we need to be precise in what we talk about. So I guess to open, I'd maybe start with a question. With your philosophy background, I'm sure you're familiar with Heidegger's concept of chatter.
No.
Okay, so Heidegger is an interesting philosopher from the 40s, but he has this idea of chatter that I think is really interesting for discussion, which is essentially how a lot of times when people have like philosophical and idea wrestling conversations, they use the same word, but they have different meanings for those words. And so then the whole conversation is just essentially garbage. That's what he calls like idle chatter. And so I'm curious if what you'd be willing to do for this conversation is if we could make sure that we agree on what we mean by certain words so that we can actually talk about the ideas underneath them and hopefully come to a better understanding of everything.
What are the words you would like specified or
probably for
clarified on?
this conversation, we should talk about patriarchy and feminism. Those seem like the most obvious things to define. And then after that, just if we come to a word that we keep both using, it would probably just be useful to define it and make sure that we agree to what we're talking about, if that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to start with your definitions and then Jay can give his?
Sure.
Or
So,
see where you guys agree.
yeah, I'm curious. So patriarchy, I would define it as a hierarchical structure where men monopolize soft and hard power.
I think that they have authority. I wouldn't say it's a monopoly on power because women can have a degree of influence and power in society, but it's under the headship of a man. So, for example, a job, right? As an example, Proverbs 31 talks about women being able to work, but it's sort of under the purview of the husband. So it's not independence, it's not doing their own thing, it's a family unit working together, so there's roles.
Sure. So when we're thinking about like a job, so when I think about a monopoly of hard and soft power, in my mind I'm thinking law, kind of like men are mostly monopolizing positions in law, but also soft power like media and kind of able to kind of set the tone culturally as well. So they kind of have these areas of power mostly fully occupied by men, particularly systems where men force it to be the case that it's only men in those positions.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
feel
just
like that's
monopoly is a difficult term because it suggests totality, and again, there can be a shared situation here that's not a total monopoly. But
okay.
Fine, I'll go with it. It's fine.
Sure. We can say like a soft monopoly or something like that.
Okay.
But essentially a hierarchical structure where
That's fine.
men tend to mostly occupy positions
That's
of
fine.
power.
Sure.
Feminism, I define it as the empowerment of women and promotion of femininity. Do you agree with that, or do you have a very different definition of feminism?
I think of it as something necessarily tied to revolution, and I think when you say the word empowerment, it's also ambiguous because that could be a lot of things in different contexts. So I don't know what you think empowerment is.
Okay, so by empowerment, what I mean is typically going to be, I'm a very big freedom of opportunity person, liberal, guilty as charged. So empowerment would be eroding any obstacles to disadvantages or inabilities to take opportunities that other people would have. That would be one way of empowering someone.
So, for example, there was a TED Talk about 10 years ago, and one of the ladies who was a diehard sort of CEO out of the academic world, she went into academia and then became a CEO. She was bragging that most CEOs now, this was again about 10 years ago, are now women. That we're reaching some tipping point, that there's a large majority of women that are now CEOs. Do you think that's good? Is that fair? Because I would see that as a revolution against male authority.
I see it, I am very dubious of her claim. B, I see it as like neutral. I don't really care who trickles up to the top, so long as the people who trickle to the top did so because there was free opportunity to do so, right? So like in our society, I'm sure here's something we probably agree on. Most of the positions of power in our society are occupied men because men tend to be more extreme, like they're just more extreme in bell curve, like genetically. And they don't often take time away from work with kids, so they have a little bit more time to dedicate. So we see at the highest levels of trickling to the top, men typically occupy those roles. I'm sure you and I would agree.
Yeah, but when you say extreme, again, this is a very ambiguous term. Extreme in their views, extreme on the bell curve.
Sorry,
those
I
are
meant
two different
genetically.
things.
Like, so because of the Y-axis specifically, so I don't know if you know anything about IQ research, for
I
example.
know some about that. Yeah.
So men, well, like obviously the average IQ for men and women is 100 because it's normalized. Men tend to occupy a bit more of those extreme spaces. They're both the lowest and the highest IQ. And we see men doing that all the time. They tend to just have more extreme genetic traits, both for success and for struggling, right? That's why we tend to see men overrepresented on both sides of most things. So that's why men often will trickle to the top of most workspaces, for example.
And you think that's because of extremes of IQ?
Well, not just IQ. That would be extremes of multiple things. And also, I think I said...
You said IQ a minute ago.
Yeah, IQ would be one thing. I just don't think IQ is the only thing that would predict you trickling to the top.
So what are the things that led men to be in those positions other than IQ?
Probably just the ability to work. Like they don't take time away from work for children. Their wife typically does that.
Could there be anything biological?
Well, IQ,
would that be biological?
IQ would be something biological,
It's
right?
partly biological, but I'm saying like in terms of what a man is biologically, is that anything to do with what might be roles in society, hierarchy?
I don't think there's super good evidence that like testosterone predicts like anything other than like aggression towards those like equal or lower and like muscle distribution. I think it's a lot more going to be...
Muscle distribution is part of biology, right?
Sure, I just don't think like muscles get you to the top of a Fortune 500
What about
company.
like being a soldier? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why men are significantly better soldiers than women.
But what about that high IQ, that group of high IQ? Does that help get them to the top of the CEO ladder?
That would definitely help. I think it's like a 45% to 60%
And you admit
predictor.
that that's partly genetic?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So it seems like naturally speaking, when I appealed in my opening statement to what's natural and biological, men are just sort of fitted to those things. Their very constitution
They often
is
trickle
for those things.
Yeah, it's just with in 2025 with women having birth control and tampons, there's less obstacles to that, so they might trickle to the top too. And I just want a society that would allow them to do so.
But why? That's what I'm getting at is, if this is biological and thus, quote, natural to a degree, according to what you're arguing, what's the need for women to do what is then perhaps not natural for them to do in society?
Because there are lots of women that are still in the high IQ realm that are very capable, that make excellent bosses.
So exceptions make the rule?
No, more like freedom of our opportunity, right? That's my premise. Is
okay.
It's like the innovator scale, right? I don't want to arbitrarily just say 50% of our society cannot be at the top of society, because I want to make sure that if they're achieving the top of society, it's because of skill and like merit and et cetera, et cetera. That's what I believe in. And so I wouldn't want to arbitrarily ban women from those positions.
Right, but it's not. I didn't even talk about banning, so that was something that you interjected. What I said
I'm not saying you did, right? Because you were asking like what I'm interested in. I'm saying a freedom of opportunity for women to just trickle up.
So there's a standard, which you would say that's a net good for society if women are able then to interject themselves into that male space.
To be allowed
that's
to.
That's a good?
Yeah.
Why is that a good?
Like I said, innovator scale.
What?
Innovator scale. More people means more innovators. You just get the best of the crop.
More people. Mm-hmm. So we should have more people in society?
Sure. I don't know if this is connected to birth rate.
Well, yeah, because the more people in society would then back up what you're arguing, right? But don't we need more husbands and wives to have more people?
Yeah, I just don't think these things are mutually exclusive.
How can a wife be a CEO and also raise the kids?
Tampons, birth control, like support.
So tampons and birth control raise the kids? What do you mean?
Lots of women find a way to both raise children and work.
Well,
shared parenting, like the husband takes roles. Sometimes they get babysitters. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's intergenerational families. There's multiple ways that women share the load of parenting.
So that's a net good?
It can be, yeah.
Okay.
Freedom of
what
opportunity.
is the standard for good here?
Do you mean like at an epistemic level?
At any level.
Good as in
your worldview, what determines the good?
So in the case of what we're talking about, I talked about the innovator scale. So the reason I like women being able to have access to opportunity is because it improves GDP.
Okay, so the net good for society is just what? More fiat money? Like what determines that?
Yep, GDP is a good thing. Do you disagree?
Yeah, I do.
You don't think
first
GDP
of all,
is
like
good?
What if the money is a scam?
That doesn't have anything to do with GDP. Why would not having more GDP for a country not be good?
The nature of the money itself, if the money system is a debt-based scam, doesn't have anything to do with GDP?
Not really, because GDP is about like the income of a country, right? So like debt is part of how you navigate income of a country.
Right, but our country's income is presently based on pure debt, right? Is that a bad thing?
Our GDP is not based on debt, no.
It is. Well, the whole system is based on debt. Gross domestic product is not itself debt. I'm saying the economic system itself is based on debt.
Yeah, like
because it's
MTN.
a debt-based system.
Yeah, like modern theory of like money is very debt organized. It's just like debt is not this like boogaloo scary thing in and of itself.
No. I'm talking about our system is fiat. It's not attached to anything hard. There's no hard currency that our money is attached to since the shock doctrine of Nixon, right? So Nixon goes off the gold standard. So we're now a debt-based system. So I'm just saying your highest quality was the best GDP in society. So your organizing principle is a neoliberal economic theory. So what I want to know is, even if that's itself based on debt, then what's the source of the good here?
So in this case, what is good for society is having a competitive GDP so that your enemies can't stomp you.
That's the highest good?
That's not the highest good. That's the good of what I'm talking about in the case of women entering in.
What is the highest good that determines that that's good?
Are you talking about morality?
Just at all. In your system. You tell me what your system's standard of good is.
So I'm not really sure why we're having the epistemic conversation.
Why not?
Because it feels like we're losing the plot of the conversation.
No, I want to know what your standard of the good is.
Again, what do you mean by good?
You said that the GDP is necessarily attached to the highest good.
I didn't say highest good. I said it's a good thing.
Okay, then I'm asking you what the highest good is that determines that the GDP is better than not caring about GDP.
So you're asking for my moral foundation theory?
Sure.
I'm a divine command theorist.
From what divine command?
The Christian God.
And he says GDP is good?
No.
Did Moses come down and talk about that?
I don't think GDP is moral.
You just said it was the highest good
I
for
didn't say it was the highest good.
This debate.
No, I said it's good for society
Then it's moral if it's good.
I don't think it's moral in this case.
If it's good, it's moral.
Well, you can have good as in
good
functional.
is a moral claim.
Well, of course, you can have functional claims, right?
So if it's only functional or if it's only pragmatic, then it's not ultimately a good. It's just subjective.
So at a functional level, it is, I guess, do you disagree with this idea that it's good for a state to have competitive high GDP?
It could be, but I don't think it's the highest good, and I have a standard of good. So I'm trying to figure out what yours is.
Well, what's more important for a nation state than GDP?
The health of the society.
Sure, but if the health of society is really high,
I mean, could you have? Let me give you an example. Could you have a society that's mass addicted to drugs but has a good number, a nice income?
probably not.
No, you can have societies that are full of detriment, like full of ghettos, and they're ruled over by organized crime that make a lot of money.
Typically, those countries, like if you're thinking about like the Congo or like areas that have like high levels of corruption, their GDP is horrible because typically crime is not good for GDP.
But I'm saying you could conceivably have that. It doesn't matter whether there's some exception to that rule somewhere.
It's not
in the
exception. I would
Congo.
say the rule is, in general, when you have lots of corruption and drug addiction, it's not good for GDP.
But I'm saying conceivably you could have a ruling elite that makes a lot of money from drugs, and the society itself is living in shantytown, right?
I
They're
don't
living on
think that
Skid Row.
nation state would have high GDP. I don't think there's any evidence
It
that
doesn't
nation
matter
state.
if you think that, because it's conceivable that you could have that, right? You could have a successful oligarchy that makes a lot of money, and the people themselves don't do very well.
Are you talking about like Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, but Saudi Arabia, again, is not nearly as competitive as somewhere like America or any NATO
Well, again,
country.
how do we know that competitiveness for women is a good? You've just said that that's the case because it increases GDP.
So I'll just
so
break
it's
it
a
down.
circle.
It's okay. If we're gonna do
What?
we can do Agrippa's trilemma. It's just useless. I can use it at you too, right?
Well, but if I'm arguing for a moral ought on the basis of
this is not a moral ought.
It is. You
This
said
is
it's
not.
a good. If you said something is
I
good.
said it's functional.
Yeah,
what
but-
word? Okay, we're doing chatter.
So
what
now
word
you're
do you want me to use when I say functional?
No. In a debate, if you're arguing for your position, then you're necessarily arguing that we ought to follow your position.
Yeah, I think I said
so
it's
it
a
is an ought.
necessity and an unavoidable. That doesn't
So
mean
it
it's
is an
a,
ought.
It doesn't mean it's a moral claim. It would be like realpolitik.
Well, then it's an ought, because do you think we ought to follow your
Not
arguments?
all oughts are moral.
Ought we follow your arguments?
As in, like, should you do what I prescribe for society?
Ought we follow the true arguments versus the false arguments?
Sure.
Okay. Then you're using an ought right now to argue for your position.
Sure, but this isn't a moral claim.
You just argued that we ought to follow your position. That's
It's
a
still
moral
not a moral claim.
It is.
It's not.
Oughts are morals if you're extending them to everybody in the theoretical realm of listening to the debate.
Do you think that it's
So we ought
moral or
not?
not moral to have GDP? Do you think GDP is moral?
I'm pointing out that your
Could you
position.
answer my question this
I have
time?
a different system than you, so
Do
it's
you
not going to
think-
apply to my system.
Do you think that GDP is moral?
Everything in life is conceivably or potentially moral,
How is GDP moral?
because you extended it to, in this argument, the highest good.
I did not.
You did
I
walk
did
it
not,
back after
no,
I asked for the highest good.
No.
Yes, you did.
I did not.
You
I said
said
for
in
a
this-
nation state, I guess it's like one of the higher goods. Yes. It's not the highest good. And I've said,
So, and what is the good?
Jay, I don't know how to explain to you over and over that this is not a moral claim. It's real
You're
politics.
saying that?
It's pragmatism.
You're saying that, but ought we follow your argument in pragmatism here?
If you want a flourishing society by and large.
So we ought, logically.
Sure, but it's,
Ought we
again,
logically?
It's sure. It's not a moral claim.
It's not.
Is GDP a moral claim?
It can be depending upon
How?
the system.
How is GDP a moral claim?
In your system,
How is
you're
more-
arguing that what you just said we ought to follow your arguments.
I don't know how many times to tell you this.
Yeah, but
I'm not
you're
making
confused.
a moral claim.
You are,
I'm
and you're
not.
saying you're not.
You're just keep telling
Anytime
me
you
that I am.
say that there's an ought,
That's not true.
that is true.
No.
It is.
No.
Even if you redefine it as
Okay,
functional.
how about this? You don't
because-
have to have a liberal society that has a high GDP. You're just going to get stomped and you'll be a failed nation state. It's neutral morally.
Yeah, but you're missing the point about highest goods for society. You're arguing
I'm
that.
not engaging in that yet.
Wait, hold on.
Well, that's big. Go ahead.
Oh no, just if you guys can just try to let each other finish your thoughts. But go ahead.
So this debate necessarily comes down to metaphysical claims and epistemical claims and ethical claims.
No.
Yes, it does.
Because
feminism is about morals, ethics, biology, society, social relations. You can't divorce ethics from that. Now, if you think you can, I'm happy to address that, but that's just going to get you in an even deeper bind.
I'm not saying that you can't, that you can divorce these things. Of course, feminism
you just argued a minute ago that it's not moral.
GDP is not moral.
Then you can't divorce these things. So you just contradicted yourself.
So there are lots of elements. Okay. There are lots of elements within feminism that do make moral claims, right? Lots of them. When I'm talking about something like an innovator scale, it's not a moral claim. It's real politics.
I understand you think that, but I'm pointing out that it is still moral. That's the argument I'm making.
Okay. Do you want to engage with the actual conversation now?
You saying that doesn't avoid the argument I'm making.
Okay.
I know that's what you're trying to do.
Why is GDP not good for society, or is it?
I'm saying it depends on your standard of good, and that's what I'm asking you what
what's
the standard
your standard of good? And
I think GDP can be great for a society, but it's not the highest good of society,
Sure,
such as the social cohesion of society. That's more important than who's making fiat money.
Okay, what do you think is the role of the nation state?
The nation state has the job and the duty to defend its people and to maintain a healthy society, to punish the wicked, and to reward virtue.
Sure, yeah, I would broadly agree. It's to keep its citizens safe, right? Okay, how does it do that at a foreign policy level?
But I said reward virtue and punish vice. So there's also necessarily an ethical component there.
Sure, that's your claim.
Right, that's my worldview.
Yeah, I'm just engaging with it.
Right.
Okay, so then how does your nation state and your worldview protect itself from enemies?
It has a standing army.
Okay, and how does it fund that standing army?
Well, nations have gone into debt, or they have been prosperous and used their own treasuries, or they have raised money to go to war. So there's a lot of different ways that could happen.
Okay, and so what do you think is the right way to do that?
It's an oversimplification question, because not everything in regard to warfare or history of civilizations is necessarily right or wrong. It's a question of what might be the best or the worst. So there can be scales. It's not
Would you
all
say
either
that
or.
there are some things that aren't moral necessarily? Some of them are just pragmatic, and then there's some things that are moral?
Everything could potentially be moral, but some things are pragmatic, sure.
Okay, that's basically what I've been saying.
Yeah,
So
but you were appealing to the good of a nation state.
You were, again, because you were using the word good in a way that I wasn't meaning it. And even though I clarified multiple times that I meant functional, and I even said, what word would you like me to use to describe this?
I understand that you think that saying that because it's functional, it removes the ethical domain, but it doesn't, is the point I'm trying to make. Because the question that we're debating is whether feminism is good for society or not. That's an ethical, moral claim.
Okay, so going back to the chatter thing, how we have to agree about words, okay? You're now essentially assigning to me what good means, and it's obvious that I'm not agreeing.
No, I'm doing an internal critique is what I'm doing. You know what that is?
You're assigning to me.
Do you know what an internal critique is?
Tell me.
So I'm criticizing your position on its own grounds. That's an internal critique. That's what happens in debates.
Okay, what word would you like me to use when I am describing this non-moral functional element that is
the one that makes a non-moral position makes sense of why feminism is a good for society?
We can get there, but again, we have to.
You're not going to get there.
Well, we can, but you're not even like, we're doing chatter. We're literally, we're doing the thing I asked not to do.
We're at the point where you don't understand the issue. That's the point.
That's not true. All you've done at this point is just like, you're just weaponizing
No, you admitted that the debate is about whether feminism is good for society. That's a moral, ethical domain right there.
Sure, there are some moral elements.
So when you make arguments about GDP, if it's not moral, then it's not relevant to the debate.
It's absolutely moral. What language would you like to use? I said it's not. There is moral elements, and there are some non-moral elements. GDP.
Is the debate today about something moral?
I don't know if I agreed to saying we're only going to talk about epistemics and morality. Good is, again, this word that we're basically doing chatter around, where you're assigning a label to it, and I haven't agreed to it.
I'm trying to figure out your position on the good.
My position on the good is it's holistic. There are things that are good because it's functional, and there are things that it's good because it's moral, right?
Is the debate today, feminism, about the good of the moral for society?
It's about, I guess, I would like to make the case for both.
The answer, okay. So then that
moral.
means that everything you've been saying for the last hour is wrong.
No, because I'm making a case for the functional element too.
But the fact that you're making the case for the functional element too doesn't matter if you're also talking about the moral.
You can make both arguments, and I would like to engage in the first one.
Right, because the other one is the one I'm looking at, and that's the problem for you.
It's not the problem for me. The problem with this conversation is that essentially what you've done is you've assigned me a bunch of positions that I don't have.
No.
You've done a bunch of circle talk about words. You've done a couple of rhetorical flashbangs. And now we're stuck in the situation where we can't actually talk about the ideas, which is unfortunate because I was really looking forward.
You're chasing, like one foot is nailed, and then the other one is going in a circle, like a cartoon. You're like a cartoon character running in a circle.
If you want to like throw Agrippa's trilemma at me, you can, but I can throw it at you too. And if we do that, then there's no point. We're at an impasse. What do you think is good?
The good ultimately relates to God, the highest good.
Okay, the highest good. So is GDP in direction of that or not?
All things that exist are good in some way, and in some way relate to morals. But I do not believe that the GDP is the highest good for society.
Okay, what is the highest good for society?
The health and flourishing of the society, which has to exist within some kind of patriarchal norm. That's the only way that it can function.
Gotcha.
And the ones that don't, they dysfunction.
Okay. And so in your mind, does GDP contribute to any of that?
It's just one component of life, just like, I don't know, the size of the nation's landmass is one component.
Sure, I would agree with that.
But it's not the highest good.
Okay, gotcha.
So what's the argument that feminism is good for society?
Feminism is good for society at a functional level because it increases innovator scale. I also think it's the right thing to do.
That's moral oughts.
Yep, I'm giving you a moral claim now.
Okay, thank you. And why is it right for society?
It is right for society because I think in general we should try to treat others well, and I think limiting people's opportunity by force is bad for them. I don't think God wants that.
Okay, what God?
The Christian one.
Okay, where does he talk about this?
Forcing people to do things?
No, this idea of what the good is for society, because we have a lot of historical Christian societies.
Sure.
Were any of them feminist?
No, but I don't think in general that God advocates really strongly for a political system.
Really?
No.
What about when Israel was organized? Was that a political system? What did they have?
In 1948?
No, in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament. Was it? It was a political society.
How was it organized?
I'm not a Jew.
What does that have to do with whether it was organized in a certain way or not?
It has nothing to do with my claim.
What does the Old Testament say about how God organized that society?
He gave them prescriptions about how to run their life from Moses.
How was that society organized?
It was organized, I believe, in a patriarchal society with matrilineal heritage.
And it was a monarchy?
Yes.
A male monarchy?
Yep.
Okay. So, in that regard, God was not feminist, right?
I've never said that God was feminist.
Well, I'm asking if there's a history example of where God organized a feminist society.
I mean, it's interesting because when you look at like ancient Judeo history, if you're not being presentist, it was like insanely progressive compared to like the pagans around them, like the Assyrians and Babylonians.
That's not what I'm asking.
Well, it is what you're asking.
You're calling
right?
it progressive, and I would just say it's healthy. So the fact that they had they had the Ten Commandments.
God seemed to advocate to some degree for a better treatment of women than any other society around them.
But that's not feminism.
To some degree, you could argue that it is if you agree with my definition, which is like the empowerment.
Well, but your definition is so elastic and broad that it could be anything except for what my position is. No, I don't, because I'm not agreeing that Old Testament patriarchal society is feminist. You just admitted it's not.
If you're not agreeing, why did we even define the words at the beginning?
Can you name a feminist society
I'm not
that God advocated?
I'm not interested to.
You appealed to God.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to treat women well.
Did God ever? That's not feminism. Now you're equivocating.
I'm not equivocating.
Yes, you are.
How am I equivocating?
You're changing, moving the goalposts as to what feminism is.
That's a completely different fallacy.
If God has,
equivocating or am I moving? Hold on, am I equivocating or am I moving the goalpost now?
It's both. You're equivocating on the word and moving the goalpost to make your position work. So if there's no feminist, equivocating on the word.
That's not what equivocating means.
I know what equivocation means. Yes, it does. It means that two different understandings of a word. You're equivocating on the word.
Okay.
Feminism. And you're defining to say that if God in the Old Testament gives women rights, that's feminism. That's not what feminism is. Feminism is a modern movement, post-revolutionary philosophy.
Then why did you agree to my definition of feminism?
Because it's so broad that's fine if you want to defend that against patriarchy, but I'm arguing patriarchy against feminism.
So
And
all
what
you're
you
doing
appeal
now
to
is moving the goalposts by originally agreeing to a
no.
definition of feminism, and now you're saying that can't work anymore because it's defeating my argument?
The Old Testament God and the New Testament God are the same God, and they never institute a feminist society. And women's rights are being made in the image of God, that women are protected now in that status.
What do you mean by
is
a
not
feminist
feminism.
society? What do you mean by a feminist society?
A matriarchal society
I'm not
or
advocating
a
for that.
non-patriarchal society.
I've never advocated for either of these things.
Okay, but feminism has never been a societal goal in the Old Testament or the New Testament or the history of any Christian society.
Again,
so you have no
I haven't
examples of
advocated.
this.
I haven't advocated for any of these things. I don't need
You
to.
appealed to God as your standard of the ought and
I
the
said
right, the moral right.
Yeah, it's a
right?
moral thing to treat
Correct.
women well.
And then I said, give me the examples of where that God ever instituted anything like what you're talking about in terms of feminism, and there's not. There's not.
There is, according to the definition you agreed to
No,
on
there's
feminism.
not.
Yeah, the empowerment and promotion of femininity. Judaism.
That is not what is happening in the Old Testament.
Judaism
That
is
is not.
the most progressive approach to femininity of all of the ancient
Modern rabbinic
religions.
Judaism is not the same thing as what's in the
But
Mosaic Law.
You asked for
You
Old
admitted-
Testament
you
examples, which
admitted
I
it.
just gave you one.
That's not rabbinic Judaism. You admitted that it's a patriarchal society that's a
What do
monarchy.
you mean it's not rabbinic? You don't think Old Testament Judeo, like,
No, it's not.
it's not
different.
rabbinic? What are you talking about?
It's not the same thing as
You
rabbinic
don't think
Judaism.
that the 1200 BC society that was erected by King David wasn't a rabbinic society?
Rabbinic Judaism comes out of the 4th and 5th century when the Babylonian Talmud is collected and collated.
So you don't
That's
think that
not-
the Old Testament at
is
all
not rabbinic, no.
Okay.
And it's patriarchal. So even if it was rabbinic, it wouldn't
That's fine.
refute.
I,
Then there's no examples of what you're talking about.
well, the issue for me is that what you're doing is you're creating a false dichotomy. You're pretending like patriarchy and feminism can't coexist at
Correct.
the same
They
time.
cannot.
Of course they can. We live in one.
Being feminine is not the same thing as the movement of feminism.
I didn't say that it is. I said that
You
we
did.
are.
You said that femininity is promoted in the Old Testament, and you used that as a way to prove your position.
I said it empowered women and it promoted femininity. It empowered women by creating matrilineal lines of inheritance, and it promoted femininity by making a whole bunch of female figures be viewed as these like incredible characters to like look up to, like Ruth and Deborah and stuff like that.
Okay, well, there's a
Which,
plenty.
according
there's
to the
plenty of,
definition you agreed
there's
to on
plenty-
feminism, would be feminism.
Then it wasn't, quote, progressive according to your view, because other societies worship the goddess, and
you
that would be
wanna-
more progressive than what you said.
If you want, we can go back an hour and we can redo chatter, and you can make a new definition for feminism that you like more, so that you can apply it more narrowly if you'd like.
You have moved the goalpost.
I have not. I
From
wrote it
what
down.
feminism is.
I wrote it down,
to be
and you agreed to it.
anything that. So is the goddess feminism?
I don't know what
Is
the
goddess worship in the ancient pagan world, is that feminism?
It might be.
Okay,
I'm not
thank
sure.
you.
I don't know anything
so your
about.
view,
Well,
your,
hold on.
So your
Hold
position
on.
is so elastic that it could encompass any
Then
possible
why did you
position.
agree to it?
It's unfault because the way you framed it was anti-patriarchy, and I'm fine
I
with
didn't
that.
frame it that way.
Yes, you did.
I did not frame it that
the
way.
terms of this debate
If you
are:
wanna go back an
is
hour-
feminism good or is patriarchy good?
I wrote it down. Do you want to go
the
back
fact
an
that
hour?
you wrote it down just means that you misunderstand what you wrote down.
No,
that's even dumber.
The issue, rather than you just being bad faith for no reason,
No,
is
this
that
is good. You didn't even know what an internal critique is. So
Well,
I'm not being bad faith. I've been debating for 25 years.
it's
not bad faith.
it's completely fine to know what terms are, right?
Sure, but in terms of debate, that's like 101, knowing what an internal critique is.
I understand what like consistency checks are. I just didn't use the language internal critique, right? So if we want to go back an hour, you agreed to this idea of chatter, right? How we want to define concepts, agree to them so that we can talk about
Women
ideas.
prattle or chatter? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So if you agree to that and then you agree to the terms, you can change them later. I'm just going to be good faith. You can change them later if you want to. Let's just go back to the terms again and narrow it down to what we can agree to of what feminism and patriarchy means. Because
Right.
now, like, all you're doing
I
is
gave a very precise definition for patriarchy, right?
sure, I did
And you
too.
gave a very loose definition as to what you think feminism is, which could encompass conceivably anything that helps women. And that's an ambiguity fallacy.
Then provide a different definition. Don't agree to it.
In my opening statement, I said that I believe feminism is a revolutionary philosophy that destroys society. It was brought about to change society in toto and ultimately to serve into oligarchical designs and people who, and I gave sources. You can read the Rockefeller's authorized biography. They have a whole discussion of Abby Rockefeller funding third wave feminism in Cell 16.
Sorry, how is this not just as ambiguous as the one? It's just a revolutionary
Just as ambiguous.
system?
I'm literally giving you the people who funded it and the actual names of the people, like Cell 16.
I don't know why you're appealing to. I don't know why you're appealing to authority right now. None of this matters.
No,
I'm
that's not an authority. That's the people involved. It's not an authority appeal.
Yeah, if the people
don't know what an authority
who you think
appeal is.
funded them is an authority for the definition of feminism.
I gave the people involved, like Abby Rockefeller,
that
who
would
was
be an
herself.
authority.
No, it's not.
Then why are you citing them?
It's a person who's in the movement. It's not just the funder.
Yeah, you're appealing to authority.
You
right
don't know
now.
what an appeal to. That's a fact. It's not an appeal to authority. You don't know what an appeal to authority is.
You are citing them
This is so
for
silly.
a definition of feminism.
Yeah, that's not an appeal to authority.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes,
you
it
don't
is.
know what an appeal to authority. If I said my position is true because I cite the Rockefellers, that would be an appeal to authority, and
You're
that's
saying
a fallacy.
This definition
is an evidence,
true
goofus.
because of the Rockefellers. If you want,
No, I'm not. I'm telling you
If
the
you wa-
history of the movement,
that
which
has
you don't
nothing-
even know
again,
about.
I've asked you to define feminism, and now
And
what
I'm
you're
giving
doing,
you the history of that movement,
I'm
which
asking
is
you for a
three
definition.
waves.
Why, I don't
Are
know-
there three waves of
Doofus,
feminism?
why can't you give me a definition?
Are there three waves of feminism?
There's 4.
Okay, so there's 3.
Oh, you didn't know that. That's crazy.
So there are 3, correct?
There's 4.
Right, but that would mean there's also 3, even though there's a 4th, right?
That's true. 3 is less than 4.
I
Good
know
job,
that,
Jay.
but the fact that there's 4, there's still 3 that have happened, right?
Irrelevant to anything
Irrelevant.
modern
Wait a minute.
feminism.
Is that an appeal to authority?
What authority am I citing right now? I know
Well, you're
really
citing facts that you think are appeals
Which
to
authority have I cited? Name one. Name one authority I've cited, Jay.
You think-
Go. Name one authority I've
You
cited.
don't understand
Jay,
what,
name
I'm
one
making a
authority I've
joke.
cited.
I'm making a joke because
What's
you
the
think
authority I cited?
appealing to a fact is appeal to authority. Those are
That's
two different
not
things.
true.
Yes,
In fact,
it is.
when you were
If
citing
I talk
Rockefeller,
about-
when you're
listen,
citing
this
Rockefeller
is so stupid.
as the definition for feminism,
No, the
I'm saying you're appealing
funder
to
is not
authority.
the definition, you idiot.
Then why are you appealing to them in any way?
to prove the history of the movement
Do you know
and
what an
what
appeal
it
to authority
teaches.
fallacy is? Brian,
Yes,
do you know what an
I
appeal
just
to
gave you the
authority fallacy is?
example.
Okay.
I've been debating for 25 years. I know what the appeal to authority is. That's one right there.
Okay, so
See?
when
That's
you
the appeal to authority
when you
fallacy.
appeal to irrelevant people that sound
It's
authoritative
not
but
irrelevant.
aren't relevant, the history
Do you know
of
why?
feminism
Do you
isn't
wanna-
relevant to you giving me a definition of feminism
is.
that I can operate
Is it a
off of.
historical movement?
Can you give me
Is it a
fucking
historical
definition?
movement?
Yeah, of course.
Then the history is relevant to the definition, you idiot.
Then give me the definition. You can do
Let's
it,
keep
Jay.
it nice if we can.
You can do it, Jay. I
Maybe
believe
this
in
is
you.
like talking to a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, you're a big boy, so this should be really easy for you to find feminism. Go ahead.
Feminism is a historical movement that's concerned with the rights of women, including egalitarianism, the idea that women and men are equal. If we go back to Wollstonecraft, if we go back to the suffrage movement, if we go back to the notion of women not being married at certain ages as children. So the first wave wanted not just suffragism, but they also wanted to not have child brides and that kind of stuff.
I'm really proud of you. You got
But they
two
also
things.
listen.
One more.
I'm not. Shut up.
We're super
Shut
close.
up and let me finish.
We're
I'm
super
not
close.
done.
Yeah, I believe
I'm not
you.
done.
Believe
They
me, I
also
know you're not.
wanted better work hours. They wanted women to have inheritance rights. They wanted women to be able to
Okay, so
get
labor
jobs
rights.
and they wanted women in the workforce and to be in positions that they didn't have. So they wanted certain social rights
Okay,
that
so they
women
want-
did, like voting, right, suffrage, right? Those are all first wave.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
This is your definition of feminism? Okay, I'm writing it down.
Are you serious?
I'm so dumb.
You
I'm
asked
even writing
for the
it down
history
for
of it.
I
You-
didn't ask you for the history.
You
I
did-
asked you for a
you
definition.
said that it's historical,
Okay,
and I'm
rights
giving
of
you the
women,
movements.
I'm not asking for the history. I'm asking
You
you to-
said it is historical,
I'm
so I
asking
have to go
I'm
back to the
asking-
people.
No,
You're so dumb
no,
that you can't conceive of a
if-
position
okay,
apart
here,
from
watch.
the people
I'll do
who
something
came
different.
up with
Watch,
the
watch, watch.
position.
I'll do so. Israel. I can define Israel without
What does this
going
have to
through
do-
the entire history of Israel. Feminism, while it
No, you
does
can't.
have,
Actually,
yes,
you
of
can't.
course you can.
No, this
because
is
for the
so
sake
silly
of
because
conversation,
you
we have to
admitted it's
agree
a
what
historical
construct is.
movement. Therefore, it can't be divorced from the people in history.
I'm not asking
Do you
to
think it
divorce
came out of the sky?
You're
Did it come
again,
into
this is a
people's
false
minds out of the
dichotomy.
sky
This
or
is a
from the
false
people?
dichotomy. You're doing a false dichotomy again.
What are you, dude? You don't
You're
even. This is so crazy.
you're acting like you can't define it without the history. I'm telling you.
Correct. It's a historical movement by your own definition.
That doesn't mean that you can't make a definition for the word,
Yes,
so
you
we
have
can
to
just
go to
talk
the
about
people.
it.
Where do you think words come from? From people.
That
They
doesn't
don't
mean-
drop out of the sky. They come from people.
Jay, I know you can do this. You can define a word without giving me a 5-minute
you
monologue
can't.
on the history.
No, you can't.
So there's no way for you to define feminism.
Would you go to a
without
dictionary?
history.
That's an appeal to authority.
It's not an appeal
Yes,
to
it
authority.
is.
Okay, there are appeal to authorities that are fallacious, and there are appeal to authorities that are
Oh,
non-fallacious.
like when I give the examples of the
Rockefeller
funders,
as
the
a
funders of
funder
it.
is not an appeal.
It's not
a
just a
legitimate-
funder. Abby was involved in Cell 16. She's not just a funder.
That doesn't matter. That
It
doesn't
does
mean,
because it came from them.
that doesn't mean that she's a relevant authority to cite.
The one who funded it and got it going at Chicago University is
Funded
not relevant.
portions of the third wave. Yes,
Correct.
that doesn't mean that
No,
she
it
gets
comes
to
out of her money.
No, that doesn't mean
millions
that-
of dollars at
again,
Chicago University.
That doesn't mean that she's the definer of feminism.
I didn't say she was. I said she's.
You cited her as a definer of feminism.
She's involved in the third
What's
wave
the
movement.
definition of
and-
feminism, Jay?
Oh
You
my
can do
gosh,
it.
you're so stupid.
I've got
You
3
can't
things from you so far.
even do a
Feminism
rational
equals
conversation.
rights of women. Men and women are
You
equal.
admitted-
Labor rights.
I
I've
mentioned.
got 3 things. What
I
else is
mentioned
feminism? We can do this,
inheritance
Jay.
in terms of first wave feminism. I mentioned
yeah.
child age of marriage as another element of it.
Okay, so
in terms of the first wave.
Civil rights. Let's just call those civil rights.
That's not civil rights. It's oh my gosh. It's
How is that not
prior to
civil
the
rights?
civil rights movement. You idiot.
That doesn't mean that it's not civil rights, Jay. I'm just trying to create a way to make this succinct so we can get a fucking definition because you don't like mine, which is fine.
I said yours.
That's why I'm just
yours
trying to
is
now
too
get a new
broad.
one. That's fine. Make your own.
I'm giving the
I don't want the
need
history.
my own definition.
Yes,
it's
you
your
do.
position, you goofus.
No.
You debate
Jay,
positions
Jay,
like when you
Jay,
debated Jim Bob,
Jay.
and you tell people to define your position. This is how silly you are.
No, Jay.
You
I gave
a
you
broad definition.
I gave you a definition, and you
Which
don't
is too
like
broad.
it. That's
No.
fine. Make your own definition, and then we can
I
work
don't
from
need
there.
to make a definition.
Yes,
It's
you
not
do.
my
If you
position.
if you have
It's a
rejected my definition, you now have to supply one.
Yes, I'm going to the people who came up with it. Correct.
Rockefeller didn't
historically.
come up with it.
I said Mary Wollstonecraft in my opening statement is one of the first feminists in modern society.
Do you want to supply a definition? This doesn't matter, Jay. Just make a definition.
So the people who came up with it don't matter.
They matter if you can get to getting a definition out of your fucking mouth. We've got
I've been giving you
We've got four
four.
elements of
Thank you.
feminism now. Okay, so we've got rights of women, like men and women are equal, egalitarianism, labor rights, and civil rights. Is there anything else you would like to add to that definition?
As we move into modernity, we get more radical versions of this, particularly with Cell 16, which becomes almost a revolutionary terrorist movement, which wants to engage in radical action and Skittles rights, shall we say. So they move into it being Skittles as well.
Okay, so
now, I don't care if you reject
trans rights.
I don't care if you reject that or accept that. Because I'm looking at this as a historical movement, because guess what? Feminism is a historical movement. That's what we're debating.
You might not believe me, Jay. I'm so disappointed about this conversation. I talked about chatter because I was interested in a good discussion.
You keep saying chatter doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I did an internal critique and you didn't know what that was. And then I start going to the history of feminism and then you're floundering.
Stuff right now. You're just saying
I'm just
stuff
saying
right now.
stuff.
Yeah.
There we go.
So going to chatter, the reason I asked you about it is so that we could have a decently good conversation so that we weren't quibbling over the definition of words and we could actually engage in conversation. If the only way that you can debate for the last 25 years is to just quibble about semantics of words, I'm sorry, you're not a king debater. You're just bad faith.
You asked me for the last 30 minutes to define a word. So you're the one that's quibbling about semantics.
I'm
that's
not
semantics.
quibbling. I'm literally not quibbling. I am writing down your word.
Oh, so if you're writing it down.
I'm granting, it's not semantics because I'm just granting your definition.
I thought it was semantics. No, it's not.
It's not semantic debating because I'm not disagreeing with you on your definition. I'm literally begging you to just give me one. I'm begging you at this point because you don't like mine. So let's give yours.
I don't care what
Rights
your
of women.
definition is because all I have to do is critique your position internally and points out that
You
it's
do have
so
to care
ambiguous.
about my definition if you're going to do an internal critique. That's the fundamental of a fucking internal critique. Is that
Oh, now you
have to
do know
use my
about. So you
definition.
just learned about an internal critique about 10 minutes ago, and
Yeah.
now you're going to lecture me on it.
You're a really good teacher, Jay. What
Thank
can
you.
I say? So
The debate's over.
you do care about.
She admitted she's learning.
You
in the
do
debate.
care about feminism and my definition of it because you need it for the internal critique, which you've already
I
acknowledged.
don't care about it because
but
it
now
doesn't-
you've
it
rejected
doesn't
my
act-
definition
oh my
of
gosh.
feminism. So again, I know being mean to women is your fallback if you have nothing
there we
else
go,
to
ad
do.
hominem now, so there we go.
It's not an ad hominem. I didn't say that
Being
you're
mean to you?
No,
Who's being mean to
I
you?
didn't say you're wrong because you're being an asshole. I just said you're an asshole.
Now you're getting your feelings
That's
hurt.
not an ad hominem. My feelings
It's
are
not
fine.
an ad hominem.
No. Insulting people and being mean is an ad hom. You should know this. You can Google it. Google it at home. An ad hom is when you use the insult of a person to discredit them. So if I said, Jay, you're wrong because you're mean, now I'm ad homing you. As a debate bro of 25 years, you should know your fallacies better. You've already been wrong about multiple fallacies.
Really?
And you can't, can't define feminism. Do you want to get there?
You've already admitted that I gave you four elements.
It
of
seems like you have
the first,
more.
So
Five, actually.
I think that
it seems
you
like you have
actually
more
think
that you want to add.
You
to.
actually think like
Or are you happy
maybe
with this
a
definition?
100 IQ person that the way that you define something is you literally just look at a definition in a dictionary and then you just list it out, and that's the definition of the word.
False.
That's
false.
Really?
I've never said
Because
that.
I'm giving you the entire
Jay.
context of the history of feminism,
Why?
and you're saying, I need a fucking definition.
Yes.
As we're working through the actual history of it and the definition of
because
what
again,
it is.
To give me
You admitted that it's a historical movement, didn't
that
you?
has nothing to do with you giving me a definition so that we can talk about it.
that it's a historical
Of course, Jay.
movement,
Yeah.
so the history has to do with it, you idiot.
I don't need the history for you to give me a definition, you
we
idiot.
have to go to the people who are the philosophers of it.
You can just define
Like
it.
Mary Wollstonecraft and her positions.
You can just define
like
it.
egalitarianism.
You can just define it. So
I'm
we can
defining
fucking
it
move
for
on.
you. I've been defining it, and you just keep yapping and melting down over your notes.
Well, the issue is that it has taken me pushing you to be specific over and over for 45 minutes. We have 5 points now.
Because you don't
for
have
feminism.
anything other than this.
That's false.
How
I
does
gave
any
you
of
multiple
this
definitions.
prove your position that feminism is good for society?
Honestly,
as a feminist,
can we
you're
get there?
showing us that you're not good for society. So you're actually proving my point as you yap and argue. You're
That's actually a
proving my
great
point.
example of an ad
Yes,
hom.
that is actually
That is an ad hom,
That is an
actually.
but it's an illustrative ad hominem. Yes, correct.
That's true. It was a very creative ad hom. Okay, so we have 5 points that you would like to define feminism. Is there any other points that you want to define feminism with?
Yes,
Is there
the
anything
people
else?
who funded that also said
Yeah.
that they like the movement because it destroys the nuclear family, gets women in the workforce, taxes the other half of the population, and reduces the population because there's less families.
How do you want to summarize that?
Why do I have
destruction
to?
of
You
nuclear
can't remember
family?
what I just
So
said?
feminism
You can't
is-
remember 4 sentences I just said?
No, I can remember. I just want to you're you're just very yappy, and so I'd like to
I'm
make it
yappy.
succinct. Yes,
I'm yappy.
to give me a definition, you've had to give me an entire century's worth of history, even though.
Like when you admitted that it's a historical movement, so it can't be
Here's the
it
thing,
can't
Jay.
be divorced from the
You
historical
know what you
people?
could have done? You could have just said to me, so that we can move forward with this conversation. Feminism is
Yeah,
rights.
but I'm not going to
Is
grant
rights
you.
of women, men
it's
and
a
women
debate,
are equal, labor
so I'm
rights,
not going to
civil
grant
rights,
you
and trans rights.
simple answers in a debate.
Why
to
wouldn't
help
you just define a word?
I
Well,
don't
if we
owe
can,
you
if
a
we can,
definition.
maybe we could avoid some of the insults, and if we can, also allow people to finish their thought. Let's try to
Okay, are you
not
happy?
do interruptions, but go ahead.
Yeah,
So
are
I
you?
want to know how any of this helps your case to prove feminism is good for society.
Well, we can get there now that we've defined feminism. So destruction of nuclear family is another one that you would like to add to
Sure.
the definition of feminism.
That's why the people who fund it matter, is because they say that.
Okay, I would argue that the destruction of nuclear families is not inherent to most feminist movements and is bad. So I reject that part of your definition.
So the people who want that in society and say that it does that don't matter. Because you have
They're not the feminism that I'm fighting for.
because you have a definition that is so elastic to make it anything that you think helps women. And that's why I've said you've already lost the debate,
I was
because
pretty
you're elastic.
specific. The
It's not
empowerment.
specific. That's why I asked you
empowerment
that
of
open
women and
statement.
promotion of femininity. So empowerment means things
That
like
is
removing obstacles.
ambiguous.
And promotion of
It's
femininity would be
ambiguous.
like making feminine traits viewed as respect-worthy.
Like submitting to authority in men? Is that a feminine trait?
No, I would not say so.
So it's not clear. It's ambiguous.
I would say
so
submission is.
you have to
feminine.
define it.
I would say submission's feminine, but I don't think
Oh,
it's to men specifically. No.
Oh, okay.
It would be like to any authority, right?
To any authority.
Yeah.
Are most authority men?
A lot of them are, but some are
So it
women.
would be to men.
Nope, it would be to authority. But men aren't a class. Men aren't a class.
But most authorities are men, and they are submitting to that, right? So it would be.
Yeah, but the idea. Okay, you love semantic fights.
No, it's called a debate.
I can do that too. If you want me to just like mock you every time you stutter, we can have a super fun conversation.
It's just how debates work. I'm sorry.
Mocking people when they stutter is not.
Rhetoric is part of debate. Yes,
this is not rhetoric. This is just you being.
If you ever watched an Oxford Union debate, they make fun of each other.
I'm fine with you making fun of each other.
That's what I've been doing.
Okay. Would you like to have a productive conversation too, or do you want to just? We can circle the drain.
I'm having a great time.
That's fine. We can just continue to circle the drain.
And how does this prove feminism is good for society?
Okay, so I already said I would reject the destruction of nuclear family. I don't think it's central to most feminism. I think most, especially...
Was it central to South 16?
It sounds like it was, but I would say most fourth wave feminists, for example, are not very pro-destruction of the nuclear family. In fact, there's like an entire like barefoot pregnant movement within the fourth wave that is very much about embracing being pregnant, being motherhood, and like promoting that as a good thing.
Is that the attitude that most feminists in society have?
I would say a lot of young feminists are directly...
Are they the most?
I wouldn't...
No, they're not.
Most also don't want to destroy the nuclear family.
Well, in academia and
most
in society
feminists
in general,
want to get married and have kids.
Does this worldview promote, in general, in society, in academia and in the corporate world, the destruction of the family, or does it help it?
It tends to promote it. Yeah, they want women to be mothers who can also
Feminism promotes women in society in general.
I would say fourth wave feminism is very pro-mother.
No,
yeah.
I asked you about the majority of feminism today.
Most feminists are fourth wave.
That's institutionalized.
Yeah, most institutional academics are fourth wave.
And they want people to have kids.
Yes.
They're not anti-natalist.
No, some of them are, but most of them are not.
Institutions?
Yes.
No, that's crazy.
I don't know what to tell you. I've been reading lots of fourth wave feminists.
I've been in academia. I've been in institutions.
Me too.
I've never met a feminist in academia or in institutions who thinks that there should be more people and more kids. They all believe in depopulation, the ones that I've met.
That's crazy. I've just met lots of feminists that don't believe that. And regardless, those feminists who are like basically death cult feminists, I'm not interested in advocating for their worldview.
That's fine.
I don't have to own them.
But the history of feminism...
Just like you don't have to own like Protestants or something.
Most feminism, right? So you've got a nuanced feminism, I guess, is your take, right?
I just have like a pretty traditional like fourth wave feminism.
Okay, but it's not historic feminism, right? Or is it first wave?
It's fourth wave.
So it's tied to history?
Of course, because there's waves.
Oh, so it is tied to history.
Yeah, but the waves, the essentials of the waves is that there's... I've never ever said that feminism isn't tied to history. You've just made that up.
I think we could go back about 20 minutes. So you can do what I do. We go back 20 minutes where you said that the history doesn't matter.
I said for your definition, it doesn't matter. You can hold frame, Jay.
Literally,
you can do this.
You have doublethink going on. Have you read 1984?
You can hold your frame.
Have you read 1984? Right. Yes. You know what doublethink is?
Yes.
It's the ability to contradict within a couple minutes.
I didn't contradict. If you remember, we can roll back the tape. We were talking about defining.
Do you think definitions are relative?
Can I finish my thought, or are you just going to interrupt me?
Because I'm trying to.
Can I finish my thought?
I'm trying to hone in on what this weird mistake is, because it's weird.
Guys, if we can, at least we'll let the insults go. Okay, if you guys want to insult each other, we'll allow that. But at least let each other finish their thoughts. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason that we went into the history and why I said I don't care about the history is I was asking for a functional definition so we could move past that part of the conversation. I always acknowledge that history was part of the feminist movement and it's tied to it.
I reject that there is a definition divorced from history.
I've never said that there's a definition divorced from history. I said I don't need the history.
Because you asked
I said
me,
I don't need the history lesson. I don't need the history lesson.
You asked me for that.
You got to let me finish, Jay.
You asked me because you're lying. You asked me for that divorce. You said divorce from history. What is your definition? That's what you said.
Yeah, I didn't want the history lesson.
Thank you. So you just contradicted yourself.
No, I didn't contradict myself.
You are a machine of contradiction.
You're desperate. You're so desperate. You're like, God, how do I get this win? I asked for you to stop giving me all of the history and just give me a definition so we can move the fuck on.
I don't accept that there is a definition divorce from history, and you just admitted that.
You don't have the brain capacity to define something without a 5-minute monologue about the history.
You just admitted you can't do that.
Define Israel. Are you going to go back 3,000 years to define it?
Yes, because it's an ancient historical nation. Yes,
so you can't define Israel without giving me a 10-minute monologue.
It's a false analogy because Feminism is a
not a false
modernist
analogy.
movement. It's a modern movement.
That doesn't
It's not
matter.
an ancient civilization.
That doesn't matter.
It does matter.
No, the
You
extent,
just saying it
the
doesn't matter
extent
just
of the
shows your
historical
lack
time
of
is not
intellect.
at all a false analogy. Extent
You
being
are
different.
melting down right now because you contradicted yourself
I'm melting
within
down
2
because
minutes.
you said that you had 25 years of debate history and you can't get a single fallacy
Look at
correct.
you. You're melting down.
You said
You're
a false,
spiraling.
How is that a false
You're
analogy?
melting down.
How is it a false analogy, Jay?
Because it's a modern movement. It's not an ancient civilization.
What does that have to do with anything when it comes to
Because
comparing
you
history
contradicted
for a
yourself.
definition?
And in debates, contradictions
Contradicting
are
myself
what
has
make
nothing
you
to do
lose.
with the false analogy. How is that a false
That's
analogy?
how you lose the debate, correct.
How is it a false analogy?
Contradicting is where you
so
lose the debate.
So you can define Israel without giving me the centuries of history. Is that what you're telling me?
I didn't say that. You just said that.
You said it was a false analogy.
You
So what was the false analogy? I never said that.
You said that. So you're yapping because you got caught.
I didn't get caught.
You did.
Again.
You did. You said that history,
No.
you said history doesn't matter, give me your definition, and then you just said history matters, it's part of the definition.
I didn't.
You contradicted
I did not say history matters as part of.
You
no,
did. Yes, you
Jay,
did.
Part of debating is holding frame, right? Would you agree?
Like when you did that, is that holding frame or what is that?
No, that was making fun of you, obviously.
Okay, right.
So part of debating is holding frame.
Like putting dongs in your mouth. Is that holding frame? I don't understand.
No, that's funny.
Is it?
Like, we're
Is
all
it?
laughing about it. Yes, it's
Or
funny.
are we laughing at you?
Kind of the same thing. That's kind of what performers do, right?
Oh.
Yeah. So part of debating is holding frame.
Is any of this going to prove that feminism was good for society? Because
We
the more that
literally
you argue,
can't get there because you
the
are
more that
still
you
quibbling.
argue, you make
over
my case.
I'm
Thank you,
not
by the
making
way.
your case. Again, just
You
an
are.
ad hom. You
Yeah, but
love
it's funny.
fallacies.
That's a
my
joke.
favorite thing about you is that you cite fallacies constantly. You don't know what they mean and you can't define them properly.
Like how history is not part of feminism,
How
but
is
it
it
is.
a false analogy to compare Israel, defining Israel?
Because it's
and
an
defining
ancient
feminism.
nation state.
Why
and
does the-
feminism is a modern political, social, revolutionary movement. They don't compare.
So why does the extent of the length
And
of
you
history
admitted
make them disanalogous?
You've already lost the debate because you admitted that the definition can't be divorced from the history, and then you said the opposite. That means you've massively contradicted yourself within the last 5 minutes.
Again, you're just making shit up. I'm glad that the made-up narrative
everybody
of the story...
heard you,
Okay,
so
I'll
that's
do
fine.
this. Jay just lost the debate because he's strawmanning me and putting words in my mouth that didn't happen. Wow, I'm really good at debating. Do you want to go back to the actual conversation?
Sure.
Okay, so why is it falsely analogous when you're saying that to define words, you must include the entire history to define the word? Why is it disanalogous to compare feminism to Israel? I asked you to define feminism, and I asked you to define Israel,
I have no
and I
idea
asked you if you
what
could define
Israel
Israel
has to do-
without
this
the
is the
3
craziest
centuries of
debate
history.
ever.
And you said, well, it's different. It's a false
Correct,
analogy.
it's a false analogy.
Why is it a false analogy?
Because they're two totally different things. And you already admitted that feminism is a historical movement and that it can and can't be divorced from the history.
So is Israel.
That's making my point, you goofus.
No, it's
Yes,
not.
it is.
I'm saying you can obviously define Israel without going through 3 centuries, which you agreed to. That's why you
It's
don't.
a false analogy because
you
it's
won't define Israel with the 3
It's an
centuries because
ancient
it's just
nation.
long. It's just long.
It's an ancient
Whereas
nation state.
modern feminism only has 100 years. So I
mean,
can
this-
give the history of that, but I can't give the history of Israel to define it because it's too long, essentially. That's your argument. That's what.
No.
Yes, that is your argument. It is not falsely analogous. And also,
keep
comparing
yapping, it
2
makes
different
my point,
things is the
please.
point
Keep
of
talking.
fucking
The
analogies.
more that you talk, it makes my whole case here that feminism is a net negative for society. Thank you for representing
Honestly,
feminism, by the way.
all you're doing
Thank
is
you
making
for
me be like,
representing
maybe the
feminism.
radfems are right and men got to be out of power because they cannot keep up. If this is what like 2
Yeah, we
masters
can't keep
and a
up, even though
philosophy
you
degree
literally-
do,
right, you literally
honestly,
contradicted yourself within-
I think the
within
conservatives
5
are right.
minutes.
Don't go to college, guys. You're
called
going to end up like
doublethink.
this. Not good.
I don't recommend people go to college, by the way, because you are the people that teach at college. So you're
I teach
actually,
at college.
you're like the college professors I debated, the women I debated, you're like them. So they should go to college if you want them to be in your position, right?
No, if they end up anything like you, they should definitely not go to college. You're like, I had a philosophy degree and I don't know what fallacies are.
Did I say that?
Basically,
was that a cut down?
yeah.
Good one. Try again.
This would be a perfect moment to read a couple chats here.
Okay.
We have Kat, who gifted 50 memberships. Thank you so much, Kat. Guys, W's in the chat for Kat. Thank you for the gifted 50 whatever memberships. Robert Tanner, thank you for the gifted 50 whatever memberships. Thank you so much. We also have Rachel Wilson in the building. Thank you for the gifted 5 memberships. Really appreciate it. And then we have a couple chats coming in here through Streamlabs. Let me get those pulled up. If you guys want to get a message in, it's $99 and up. We have Intel Wild. Oh, it's coming in as a TTS.
Intel Wild donated $100. Not so bright. Do you like BDSM because you were getting spanked by Jay?
Ah, classic. When you can't defeat a woman, you just have to sexually
Like when
degrade
you
her
do the
and make a joke
dongs in
out
your
of it.
mouth, like that. Is that a good example of what you're talking about?
When I'm sexually
I can't
degrading
defeat a woman,
myself?
so you put dongs in your mouth
No,
because
I
it's
said
funny.
you can't defeat a woman without sexually degrading her and then making a joke.
Like
out
when you
of
put
it.
dongs in your mouth. Is that
was
sexually degrading?
myself. That was myself.
Oh, by yourself. Okay, right. So it's all subjective, like relativism.
Usually you can make jokes about yourself that other
Do you believe in
people probably
relativism
shouldn't.
too?
Yeah, I do.
Really? Mm-hmm. Is it self-refuting?
No.
Is relativism true?
But depends on what you mean by true.
Is everything relative?
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's like subjective.
It
can't
means the
conflate
same
it.
thing. Yeah,
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
No, it does
Something being
not.
totally relative means that it is subjective.
No. That's,
It
I'm
does.
sorry, that is like a philosophy 101.
No, it's correct. Philosophy 101, you would learn that if something is completely relative, then it's purely subjective. It's the same.
No.
Yes, it is. It's
No,
the same,
you're
it's the
conflating
same
subjectivism
content.
to cultural relativism at best.
I know the difference between the two.
opposite of
It doesn't-
relativism?
Your position
What
is.
do you think the opposite of relativism is?
You've already, now that you've admitted that everything is relative
What do you think it
to
is?
you.
What do you think it is?
It's-
The opposite of
Well, there's
relativism.
epistemic relativism, there's cultural relativism, there's ethical relativism.
What's broadly the opposite of relativism?
Everything is relative to your vantage point, your perspective.
What's the opposite of it?
Perspectivalism.
You
No,
don't
it's
know,
not.
do you?
You are an idiot.
It's absolutism. It's not objectivism.
Relativism is not absolutism.
No, the opposite of relativism is moral
It's
absolutism.
objectivism.
No, it's
yes,
not.
it is.
No, the
You're
opposite
an
of
idiot.
You don't
You've
know
never
anything about
had. Have you?
philosophy.
I don't know
That's
philosophy.
crazy. That's
Right.
crazy.
I've debated all the top
I
atheists and
actually-
philosophers, and you
I'm
don't
not gonna
know.
lie. I didn't expect that. You should definitely
The
know
opposite
this.
of relativism is objectivism.
It's absolutism.
It means the same thing.
No, it does
Yes,
not.
it does.
No, it does not.
You have a problem with words
That's
that you
crazy.
think that two different words can't mean the same thing.
Okay. Moral absolutism is when you can apply things universally. Objectivism
Correct.
is that something can be like capital T true. These are
You can
not
use
the same thing.
You can use the terminology. You're arguing
These
over
are
an
not the
idiot.
same
Yes,
thing.
they are.
No, they're not.
Moral objectivism. What is that?
Moral objectivism is believing that there's like a capital T true that you
Correct.
can find. Yeah, that's not the same
No,
thing
no,
as
no,
an
no, no,
absolutism.
it's not.
Kant is more
moral
like an absolutist.
objectivism. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I
Moral objectivism is that there are moral absolutes. It's that simple.
No.
Yes. What do you mean no?
That's crazy. Can I get
Moral.
water?
So now she wants to run and get water.
No, I'm not running. I'm actually just, I'm gobsmacked.
Oh, there's some under
Oh, yeah.
there's
Right,
some-
because
I'm genuinely
right, because you
gobsmacked
have a
that the Phil
basically
student
you
doesn't
have
know
a,
this.
essentially
That's okay.
you have an elementary school level education, and you're
Yep.
actually debating people who actually
Which
know
is,
what philosophy
is
is.
crazy because despite my little education, you still don't know what relativism is versus like absolutism and objectivism. That's fine. We can move
I've
on.
debated the dude from the Objectivist Foundation, the Ayn Rand Foundation, so I'm pretty sure I know.
Again, then you would
And
know
he,
that
he presents the
objectivism.
position. Do you understand that a word can mean different things in different contexts? So if I say that something is morally objective, or that it's morally absolute, or that it's not relative or subjective, it all means the same thing, even though it's different words. Did you know that?
That's crazy. Okay.
That's crazy. That words can mean the same
Yes,
thing is crazy?
That you don't have any concept of the philosophical compass is crazy to
The
me.
philosophical compass.
Yes.
do a couple chats.
So memes, meme level philosophy. Yeah.
It's not meme level
It is a
philosophy.
meme. It's a meme.
It's not.
meme level philosophy because you
Okay.
thought that words didn't mean the same thing.
Okay.
We have a chat coming in here from Robert. One sec, guys. Let's get that pulled up. There it is. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate
Robert
it.
donated $200. Hey Brian, comment on this discussion. Bloomberg just reported 2 days ago that for the first time ever, white men are slightly now less than half of board members at S&P 500 companies. Progress on GDP?
Thank you, Robert. Do you guys want to discuss that or?
Not. I don't know if that's even true. If that's true, I feel
Maybe it's like
neutrally about
DEI.
it.
Okay.
It depends on like why it's the case, right? I think like white men in general are being like pretty shittily treated by society right now. I think there's like a fair bit of like persecution. So I suspect that the reasons behind that is bad. But maybe it's neutral. But probably it's bad. But maybe it's neutral.
All right, we have 3 other chats, unless, Jay, you wanted to weigh in on that one?
No, I agree. It's bad, yeah.
Sure. We have Whatever Fan. Thank you, Whatever Fan.
Whatever Fan
Appreciate
donated $100. I'm enjoying Jay Barbecue cooking her puppy cheeks better than Gordon Ramsay like a donkey.
Okay.
They like my cheeks. That's all I heard.
We have...
You got cooked, is what they said. I
They also said I'm
I know
cute.
you can't
They
hear
also said I'm
something.
cute.
Yeah.
There was a nice one that came through about you.
I saw.
All right, we have Grandma Sweaters coming in here in just a moment. Grandma's Sweaters, excuse me.
Grandma's Sweaters donated $100. Erudite that makes no sense. Feminism is a populist movement where each rep in history interprets the definition. Feminism hold ancient beliefs and utilize history as foundation for their beliefs.
Yep.
Okay. It's not a refutation of anything that I've said.
Right.
If you
Well,
guys
I
want to
understand
engage,
that you can't understand
if you want
objective
to engage with me,
argumentation. Right.
I'm right here. But if
Right.
you want to keep fighting like some
But you're
ghost
arguing
in,
in
the room,
yourself,
you go
in
for
your
it.
head. It's like a hamster wheel running, and you're
I'm
not
not.
actually in the debate.
I've defined
why the whole
feminism
chat
multiple
is put-
times. I did a lot of
But
labor
did
to
you
get
hear
you to
my?
define
I bet you
feminism.
couldn't restate my internal critique, could you?
Of me?
Yeah.
It was something about how you think that I'm like self-defeating because you think that my definitions necessarily like contradict each other, which they don't. It was just a false dichotomy.
No, that wasn't the internal critique, but good try.
Okay. Do you want to remind me?
You got more?
Yeah, we have Rachel Wilson. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate
Wilson
it. Thank you.
donated $100. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is kill it. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, first wave feminist. Feminism is intrinsically anti-natalist.
Yep.
I just disagree.
Okay.
Good job. That's good.
Thank you, Rachel Wilson. Appreciate that.
It's almost like there's lots of camps to a large movement.
So it's elastic. Exactly. Thank you.
Yep. To some degree, yeah, we would agree that there's heterogeneity within any movement.
Right. So it can be defined the way you need it at whatever point in the
No,
debate,
I
right?
defined it really clearly. Like
Very
really
broadly,
clearly.
so that you could move it later. And it
And
didn't
why'd
work.
you agree
I'm sorry
to
it didn't work.
Why'd you agree to it?
Because I was setting you up to lose later. That's why.
Oh, it was an 8D chess plan.
Correct.
And then it took
And
you
you fell.
45 minutes to define it later.
No, I just let you sink your own, dig your own hole
Okay,
after
Jay.
45 minutes.
Whatever you need to tell yourself to win.
I bet you 95% of the chat's going to agree with me. What do
I'm
you want to
sure that this chat
Because everybody's
agrees
dumb.
with you.
Oh, really?
No,
so
no,
everybody in
I-
the chat's dumb. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't say that. I said I'm sure chatters agree with you. I just don't.
But you think that my arguments are dumb, so they're dumb.
I'm not super interested in what chatters have to say. Viewers are a very different
But
breed.
optics and who won the debate is judged by the audience.
Yeah, but the audience isn't just chatters, right? It's also viewers, and these are not the same person.
I bet the comments are going to say otherwise.
I'm sure the comments on a very right-leaning, decently Eastern Orthodox that has already accepted most of your presuppositions as a show
Right-leaning
are
or
going to agree
right-leaning?
with you.
What?
Right-leaning.
Right-leaning?
Yeah, I'm sure that they're going to agree with you, but that doesn't mean that you've won, right?
Hmm.
Just like if I put this on my channel and then all of my left-leaning audiences said I won, that's not evidence that I won, obviously.
Are you sure?
Yeah, obviously, that would be like a super
Because
selection bias.
debates are for audiences.
Sure. Did you listen to anything I just said? What's a selection bias?
Well, it's when you choose the evidence based on what you want.
That's not a selection bias. That's called.
Well, you're talking about audiences, and like my audience would like my stuff. So if they like me, then I think I won because my audience liked me. So I selectively chose the audience, is what you're saying.
No. Okay. No. So you know what? Never mind.
no,
You're wrong.
No, that's what it is.
It's crazy.
So
you don't know
basically,
what any of these words mean. You've really impressed people.
Like
a selection
how-
bias
like how the word
in
objective
science,
just means
so
absolute
a selection
in the
bias
same
in science
sense?
means that like a naturally arising population that you are testing might end up having some emergent trait that you think is a construct true of that group when actually you've already set up the prerequisite methodology to find that trait within it. So my audience is going to like my shit more, and your audience will like
That's
your shit
literally
more.
what I just said.
Yeah, but the issue is that you were
but that's what I just said.
defining.
That's what I just said.
No, you said that you.
That's
were
what
selecting
I
for
just
it.
defined, you idiot.
No.
You're stupid. Like I literally just defined the same thing that you said.
Do you think that when you call me stupid, you win?
No, it's a fact.
Like, what's the
No,
purpose
it's
behind
factually demonstrating what is the case.
it? Again, do you think that
Because
you're winning by
you
calling
literally
me
give the
stupid?
same definition I did. I don't care.
No, the issue was that you were doing the what's it called when you
Oh,
cherry
I thought
pick
you knew the
evidence?
fallacies. I thought you knew the fallacies.
I do. I just don't
but
remember
you don't.
the
But you
term for
don't.
it.
You don't. Because you didn't know what an internal critique was either.
Do you remember what the
what?
word is for when you selectively you cherry pick your evidence? What's the word for that?
Well, there's two fallacies. There's the sharpshooter fallacy and the gambler's fallacy. So you might be referring to either of those.
No.
Just cherry picking fallacy?
It's not cherry picking fallacy. It's got
She
like
doesn't
a really
even know the
common nerd.
fallacies.
I do.
No, you don't.
Yes.
So
But
what's-
it's crazy.
What's the gambler's fallacy, if you know the fallacy?
What's a false analogy?
What's the gambler's fallacy?
I don't know.
You just said you knew the fallacies.
I know lots of fallacies. That doesn't mean I know every
Well, that's
fallacy.
one of the most popular ones. You don't know?
Nope.
Incomplete evidence? Fallacy of incomplete evidence?
No.
Suppressing evidence?
I
Okay.
can't think of the word.
That's
It starts
fine.
with a C.
Sure. We have a few more chats coming through. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate
Christopher
it.
Scott donated $100.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutism is a form of objectivism. They are intrinsically intertwined, not so bright.
Oh, you thought words only had one
$100
meaning.
donor said it,
you
so it
thought
must be
words only had one meaning.
true.
I'm sorry. Sometimes they can mean two different things. It's called a word concept fallacy. Did you know about that one or no?
I should write that one
You
down
should
so that
actually.
when later you get
because-
mad at me for
right,
using the word
so
for two different
Texas
things.
sharpshooter, go look it up.
A
Word concept
word
fallacy, look that up.
Can mean
Gambler's fallacy, go look that up.
two
And internal
Thank you,
critique.
Kat. Thank you, Chow.
different-
By the way, guys, we did set a super chat goal. We're at 13 of 50. We have about 50 minutes left on it. Kyla will wear a
If you
MAGA
pay me,
hat.
if you give me part of that.
I will give you a $2 bill.
If I'm the reward for it, I'm getting some of that money. But I'll definitely wear the hat.
We'll talk after the
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
We've got to see if we hit the goal, but
We can
it's
hit the goal,
happening.
guys.
50
We can
minutes.
definitely hit the
50
goal.
minutes. Let's see here. We're all caught up.
We should give
Or actually, we have
$100
one
to whichever chatter can figure out why Jay doesn't understand what a false analogy is and was incorrect in the use of it.
I know what a false analogy is.
That's true, but then why do you use it incorrectly?
I didn't.
You did. So either you're
Comparing the
lying
nation
right
state
now
of
or you're being
Israel,
bad faith.
comparing the nation state of Israel to the history of feminism is a false analogy.
What was I comparing?
You asked for a definition that was not connected to history, and then, by the way, you said that history is bound up with a definition.
So I asked
Oh,
you
so
if you
that's a
could
contradiction,
define
right?
Israel. If you could define
You said,
Israel
"Can I
without
do
going
it
through the
without
centuries.
going through the
And you said,
history?
yeah, I could. You
No,
said
I
you,
didn't.
Yes,
I
you said that
said-
you could define Israel without
No, I
going through
didn't.
the
I said I
centuries of
have to go-
history.
Now
and then
you're
the reason why
lying.
you said that it's disanalogous is you said Israel has too long of a
No,
history.
you just yapped and didn't listen.
Okay.
You I said
reframe
you
a
can't.
lot.
I said you can't define Israel without going into the ancient history.
You said that I don't want to, and that it's disanalogous because Israel
I
has
said
long
you
history and
can't.
feminism has short history.
That would contradict
That's
what you just said.
explicitly what you
That's
said.
what you. That would contradict what you just said, like 2 minutes ago.
That doesn't matter. I was catching
It
you
doesn't
in
matter.
The,
It doesn't matter. So contradictions don't matter in a debate.
Your
So thank you.
contradictions matter, yes.
Oh my gosh! You just admitted that you contradicted, and now you're saying that I'm.
No, I did not.
You did.
No.
You said they don't matter.
No, I said that when you were when I asked you to define Israel, I asked if you could define Israel without going through these centuries of history, and you said that you
no.
could.
No,
and then
I said
asked
no.
why.
I did
you
not.
said that you could.
You're lying.
and
I
then
said I didn't.
The reason why it was a false analogy
Look
is
at
because
you. You're
said that
losing
the
your
extent
mind.
was
You're
different.
crazy. You can't hold
forgot.
your
This is
frame.
crazy.
Like,
This is
I
crazy.
said you can't because in the same case as feminism, you can't.
You know what? If you want to retroactively change your claim and correct it, fair enough.
I think maybe you misheard.
No.
Because it wouldn't work
No,
for my
Jay.
argument if I said
agree.
the opposite.
That's why it was stupid of you to say.
I didn't say that.
Yes,
I
you
said
did.
that neither feminism nor Israel could be defined apart from their history.
You said that
And you're
Israel-
lying right now.
No, I'm not. You said
You
that
are lying.
You said that you
Flat
wouldn't go
out
through
lying.
the reason
The
why
whole
these were
audience, by the
disanalogous.
way,
The
this
reason why
shit
these were
is flat
disanalogous
out
is you
lying.
couldn't go through the centuries of history for Israel because of the extent. And this is why I laughed at you and I said they're
No,
disanalogous
you
because
just
one has long
misheard.
history and one has
you
short
just
history.
misheard because you don't listen.
I didn't.
And
Maybe you
can't-
misspoke.
You can't understand
I can grant
the
you that
debate.
you misspoke. Maybe you misspoke.
No, I didn't
You
misspeak.
obviously did.
I didn't misspeak.
You obviously did, but
It's
fine.
disanalogous because the two things are different. Separate from that, I said that I can't define
That's not
Israel
what makes
apart
it
from history.
disanalogous.
You don't even understand what I'm saying.
You can compare
It's like
two different
this
things.
is
The
like
things that
talking
I'm
to a
comparing is
child.
defining things without their history. And you said that I could define Israel
No,
without
I
going through
didn't.
the centuries.
I said-
that's fair that you misspoke. It's
No, I
fine.
didn't misspeak.
Okay.
You just don't listen.
Okay.
We got a chat coming through here. We got Ali Burr Knight. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Alaba Knight donated $100.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Erudite, please remove Andrew Tate from your Twitter banner. You're not worthy. Occult feminism will help with the after-co.
My favorite thing is dumbasses who think that I have up there because I like Andrew Tate. It's clearly a meme. It's obviously a meme.
Earlier on in the discussion, you said that feminism is unavoidable. I think during your opening introduction.
Unavoidable and necessary, yeah.
Do you want to get into that a little bit? Like why is it unavoidable?
I think because as nations grow, essentially, eventually you will want women to join the workforce to be able to compete at like a global scale. And therefore it becomes inevitable because you need women to join the workforce. And as soon as women join the workforce, they now have way more leveraging power by having money and certain rights. And once they have those rights and those leverage powers, they're necessarily going to leverage that power to give themselves more freedoms that they obviously wanted. What are you asking right now?
If it didn't exist for thousands of years in history, then it wasn't necessary.
I'm pretty sure you literally said that multiple countries fell because of like liberalization. So
I'm just asking you.
Liberalization and giving women more rights.
Did
over
it exist
time
for thousands of
in
years
history.
until modernity?
Not all the forms of it.
Okay, so then it's not necessary and it's not inevitable.
It's
Thank you.
absolutely necessary at this point because
If
in
it
2025,
didn't for thousands of years, then it's not necessary and inevitable.
I'm going to teach you something crazy.
You're not
Jay.
going to teach anything.
Over time,
You're not going to teach
technologies
anything.
develop, which means that the way that
You're just
the
yapping
Romans...
and talking and asserting things.
You got to let me talk. The way that the Romans worked their world is not the way that we can work our world, obviously, because things
then
like
it's not
guns
inevitable
exist.
and it's not necessary.
It is inevitable because
Was it necessary and inevitable in Rome?
Wait, just let her finish. Let her finish. Go ahead.
Okay, for example, if you don't update to technology, your society tends to fall behind.
None of this is
so
relevant.
technologies that made
Let her finish.
So technologies that make feminism necessary and unavoidable would be things like tampons and things like birth control. This is absolutely true, and they're never going back in the hole. We're never putting the Colgate back in the fucking tube, right?
Wow.
So Poland is a great example of a country that didn't update its technology, and as a result, it got stomped. When the beginning of, I believe, World War I or World War II, they invested in cavalry because the Polish cavalry was like the greatest thing, the Winged Hussars, everyone loved them, but tanks became a thing, and they got absolutely, utterly dumpstered and destroyed, which is why for societies to compete at a global geopolitical level, you have to keep up with technology. The reality is that China wants to win over America, which means they're going to allow women into the workforce, they're going to give them tampons, they're going to give them birth control. You have to
None
let
of
me
that
finish my
proves that it's
statements.
necessary and inevitable.
It proves that it's necessary and inevitable because the technology changes at a global level, and for you to compete at a global level, you have to allow women into the workplace.
So she just yaps. This is like her whole thing is to just yap. If it didn't happen in Rome, then it wasn't necessary and inevitable, and that proves my point.
Do we live in Rome anymore?
Oh my gosh, are you serious? You're that stupid.
Do we live in Rome anymore? Or the technology
You said necessary and inevitable?
Yes.
Was it necessary and inevitable in Rome?
Again, or do we live in Rome? Do we live in Rome?
So that it wasn't necessary and inevitable.
Are the technologies
Can you
the
follow
same?
an argument that isn't
I
just
can.
yapping and asserting your position?
Jay, can you
It's an argument.
follow me?
What's the argument?
It was not necessary in Rome because they didn't have tampons.
Then it wasn't
and birth
necessary and
control.
inevitable. Thank you.
It is inevitable because we now
Then
have
it's not
tampons.
necessary. You just said it's not necessary.
Do tampons exist?
That refutes your position.
Do tampons exist?
No.
Did they exist in Rome?
No, they don't exist.
Did they exist in Rome?
There are no tampons.
There's no such thing as
No.
tampons. Okay, great. If the tampons...
There's no such thing.
Did they exist in Rome?
No.
So tampons are not real.
Correct.
Okay. Well, if we're doing this type of debate, I guess that's true. And the sky's purple, and I'm a 12-foot hippopotamus.
We have some chats coming through. We have Flower Pot.
Flowerpot91 donated $100. You two just need to bang already. You are obviously secretly in love.
I'm married.
I think
I'm
they're
also
both,
married.
They're both married.
Happily.
Thank you, though, for the message, Flower Pot. We have Lucas here. He says, "Dear God, is this the exemplar of today's U.S. education system? This woman is an amalgam of feckless, vapid ineptitude
said it
combined
must be
with
true.
unearned high self-esteem." Do you want to respond to that, Kyla, or?
I'm Canadian.
Huh?
I'm Canadian.
Oh, right.
Even worse.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Actually, Canada has like one of the most competitive education systems.
No, it's worse because it produces examples like this.
We have Intel Wild. Thank you, Intel Wild. Appreciate
Intel
it.
Wild
Thank you.
donated $100. Not so bright, you look like you have gained some weight lately. Moo moo oink oink oink.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I just finished my bulk cycle. So I'm about 15 pounds heavier than I am, and I'm
Crazy.
about 120% more muscle than I want, and I
Is that
started
part
cutting
of
2 days ago.
feminism?
That has nothing to do with it. I'm answering why I'm fat right now.
Are you building muscle bulk or fat
Yeah.
bulk?
No,
might have
no.
been talking
I
to
just
me
said I gained 120% of the muscle that I'd ideally like to maintain after my
Okay, that's why I said, is that part of your feminism regimen?
Nope, it's just part of putting on muscle, which
All right.
you would not know about, I guess.
We have Giovanni. Thank
Jalen
you.
donated $100. It's not too much to demand definition for the entire topic of the debate. A good faith debate is contingent on being charitable to the other's intention. Gay sophistry to secure W is lame AF.
That's true. It is.
You got one fan.
It is pretty gay.
Good job.
Is this directed
That's
at Jay?
crazy. You knew that was about you. Oh my God. Thank you. That's so fucking funny.
Dude, you're so cringe right now.
He's like, I know that's me. I'm doing the gay sophistry. That is so funny.
Well, if any of you want to get a chat in, it's $100 for a TTS.
And
you
remember,
can do that at streamlabs.com.
If you put in enough
whatever.
money,
Yeah.
I'll wear a MAGA hat.
Yeah, let me see where we're at on that. So we're at 17 of 50, so we need 33 more to hit the goal. We got about 45 minutes. You got to do 10 and over super chats over there on YouTube. Or if somebody does a champagne pop, we'll just do it right away. So,
Is that like a big donation?
yeah, it's through Streamlabs. They have to, they do it through Streamlabs. Or if we have Crystal here, they have to do 1 Ethereum. So that's another option. If you
One
guys wanna
Ethereum?
get 1 Ethereum for a...
How much is that worth now?
It's like, I think 1800 last night,
18-ish.
around there.
Holy shit.
It went down, but it's a little back up. So
You're high class. That's expensive.
I've got some Cristal here if you guys want to get liquored up. So, okay. I would like to continue on a little bit with the debate here. Do you guys want to shift the prompt to,
Sure.
We could talk about patriarchy specifically. We
Just
could
pick a
talk
word
about,
and we'll fight about the definition for another
do you guys
45
want to talk about
minutes.
immigration or something?
No.
No? Okay.
Not really.
Well,
I didn't prep for immigration,
Yeah, I
so
know. I was
I
just
wouldn't want to
throwing
talk
it
about
out there.
immigration, yeah.
I'm just, at least with a feminism related topic, trying to think here. Any suggestions?
I mean, we could talk about whether or not you think it's biological or not that men have an innate role to lead or not. Because when you debated Jim Bob, you seem to think that soldiers are who puts on a costume.
What?
You said that a soldier is anyone that wears the costume of a soldier. Right?
I'm pretty sure I was making fun of Jim Bob when I said that. I don't
No,
think
you
anyone
were arguing that there's no difference between a soldier who's a man and a soldier who's a woman because anybody who puts on the uniform becomes that.
I
Right?
feel like you must be citing Ken. I think Ken was somewhat equalizing
No.
the genders. What are you asking?
No, you were
just
arguing
ask me the
about
question.
whether or not men should be the frontline soldiers. You and Jim Bob particularly were going back and forth.
I'm
right?
fine with men being frontline soldiers. Why don't you just ask me, rather than putting words in my mouth, just ask me what you want to ask me.
I did just
and I'll
ask you a
respond.
question. I said, do you think that there's a gender or natural component that men have that makes them leaders and women not leaders in general?
Yeah, to some degree, yes. And then I think that gets reinforced culturally as well.
What does that mean?
What's the biological pieces?
No, what do you mean when it's reinforced culturally? Like what? What is?
Multiple things. It would be multifactorial. So, okay. Fancy word, I know. Very
Right.
spooky.
I don't know big words. Go ahead.
You do. I'm sure you know what
No, I don't. No,
what does
I don't.
multifactorial mean, Jay?
Make your argument.
Okay, sure. So when I say multifactorial in a cultural way, I mean things like epigenetics, right? So I think when we have a culture that reinforces certain things and makes people more successful as a result of those expressions, we'll also reinforce it through epigenetics. It'll turn them on more often, but also then it builds a cultural, social identity of like what it means to be man. And that's both testosterone and neurochemical, but it's also slightly epigenetic, right? But it's also on top of that, it's things like culture and society and what we do
So there
together.
is a component that's biological, that's genetic,
of
but there's
course.
also a component that you think is cultural.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's natural and biological, why ought we put into place a position or a system that is counter to that? That would make that position or system unnatural. That's what I argued at the beginning, trying to make that point again.
Because it's not just biological, right? And I think
But the fact that it's not just doesn't address the question that's being asked.
because by limiting people
That's a
arbitrarily,
parse-hole fallacy, by the way. Do you know that?
because by limiting people arbitrarily, I think you decrease your
It's not
innovator scale.
arbitrarily.
It is arbitrarily. So, for example,
You just admitted that there's a difference, so it wouldn't be arbitrary.
it would be arbitrary. So, say for example, well, you
is
don't
like
want
talking
to
to a
don't
child.
do
Oh my
ecological
gosh.
fallacies on me, right? So, if we have like a bell curve, right, of men and women, and men tend to be a little bit more extreme, and say we're selecting for a job that's purely
So you're
about.
repeating the first 20 minutes of this discussion and ignoring what I just asked you.
If you want me to respond to you, I can. If you want to just like bloviate, sigh,
But you're
and be
not
angry,
responding.
we can do
You're
that.
just you're just
I'm
reiterating
trying to
restating
give
the
you a
first 20
response.
minutes.
I'm trying to give you a response.
It's not a response.
Okay,
It's
I can just sit
repeating
here
what
and you can
said.
be
So
like,
it's like a machine.
Fallacy, fallacy. Or do you want me to respond?
You can try.
Okay. You sure? You're the leader here.
Try.
Okay. So at an individual level, right? I don't want a system that would limit any single individual from achieving higher levels than they can otherwise achieve. What? Why are you mad?
It's just like talking to like a child. It's just
Okay. What word are you mad about? I know words are very sensitive for you.
What justifies the position that you're arguing for, that patriarchy should not be the norm, but feminism
I've never
ought
said
to,
that.
Oh my God.
I've literally never said patriarchy
They're
should be
mutually
the norm.
exclusive
They're not mutually
positions.
exclusive.
Yes, they are.
They're not.
Feminism is a revolutionary
We live in a
movement.
patriarchy and feminism exists.
That doesn't mean that they're not mutually exclusive.
Yes,
That's
it
a
does.
stupid argument. No, it's not. That's an appeal to that's a naturalist fallacy. The fact that it is so, then it must be good or it must be right.
I'm
That's
not
a
saying that it's
fallacy.
good or right. I'm saying that they both exist.
The
which means
fact that
they're
they
not
exist
mutually
doesn't
exclusive.
mean that the positions
How
are
are they
coherent.
mutually exclusive?
They can be ideological or epistemically incoherent, even if they exist at the same time. You don't know that?
Okay. So how are they mutually exclusive, Jay?
Because they're contrary positions. Patriarchy is an anti-feminist position. That's what I'm arguing.
I would not agree with that by and large. Do you
It's
think
a-
patriarchy just means that
that's-
it wants to oppress and crush women?
You admitted that feminism is a historical movement. All of its proponents are revolutionaries who wanted an egalitarian society and did not want a patriarchy. They're mutually exclusive. So you've
I just disagree.
redefined the position to be your own feminism that's not relevant to what we're debating.
I don't have to argue for those women. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
But your
concepts.
position is stupid then, because it's an ambiguous position that's just anything that you subjectively think helps women.
Nope. I just don't think that. Nope. Okay. I don't think that feminism is doing a good job by just dismantling patriarchy unless the patriarchy is enforced.
Okay, we haven't heard why feminism's good other than GDP.
That's because you.
That's
keep
because
quibbling-
you didn't give an argument.
No,
you
it's
just
because
said
you keep
GDP.
quibbling over words.
You just said GDP.
You get
No,
really
you
mad,
didn't give an ought.
and then you got like super.
No, I called you out on
morally
oughts.
epistemic.
I called you out on
about
oughts,
GDP.
which you can't do.
I will use literally any fucking word because I know you really love words to try
Yeah,
to.
debates have to do with
try
words.
It's crazy.
Why
You
ought
are
we
the-
have?
You are
Why
the
ought we have? So
epitome of
she can't
Heidegger's
tell us
chatter.
why we ought to have feminism.
Just so you guys
she
know,
can't give an
this
ought.
is chatter. This
she
is what
can't
we're
give
talking
it. What's
about.
the ought?
We can't. I don't even want to go there because
You don't have an argument.
No, because you can't engage with me because you get so persnickety about
What
words.
is the argument that feminism is right for society?
It is beneficial to society because it improves innovator skill. It allows more people
so
to enter the
GDP again.
workforce. GDP is one of the
Yeah,
things. that
and why
it
are we
does.
supposed to think that's the good?
Because I think it is morally good to allow
You think
maximal
that? No,
levels of
why is
freedom
that
of-
the good?
Because I believe that it is good.
Oh, so it's you subjectively saying because it's the good.
No, I'm a divine command theorist.
But when we went to God, God didn't ever give us
I
a
don't think there's-
feminist society.
Yeah, but I don't
By
think-
your own admission.
Actually, I think we, by my definition of feminism, we both agreed that ancient Christianity was feminist.
No,
and then you
that's
were like,
moving the
"You know what?
goalpost."
Never mind. Feminism is not that thing
That's
anymore.
moving the goalpost.
It's not moving the goalpost in any way, shape,
It's-
or form.
you admitted-
I have had the
you
exact
admitted that
same
the
definition
society-
of the fucking
you
word.
admitted the
whole
society-
time. You just don't like it.
No, you have an elastic, broad definition that you
I've
allowed to fit.
specified it as much
it's
as
a
possible.
monarchy and a patriarchal society in ancient Israel. That doesn't help feminism. That's not your position.
Absolutely,
There's no feminism
it does,
then.
because it gave women like rights to owning
That's
land.
not
It created
feminism.
inheritance. Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Feminism is a modern revolutionary movement, you idiot. it's not an ancient movement.
This is unironically
It's
you
not
being
an
like,
ancient
it's not civil
movement.
rights because the Civil Rights Act didn't exist
You're
yet.
debating feminism,
That's not how
which
this
you
works.
said is a
word-
historical movement.
A word can mean multiple
You said it's a
different
historical
things.
movement.
I agreed, but yes, it's a historical
So it's not an
movement,
ancient
and
civilizational
it's a construct.
movement.
It's a construct.
It's
and
a
an idea.
modern revolutionary social movement.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that
It
we can't
doesn't
find
matter.
elements
It
of
doesn't
feminism in the
matter.
past.
She just
Of course.
lost the debate again for the fourth time.
This guy just
She
lost
said
the
it
debate
doesn't matter.
4 times in a row because he didn't even know that there are 4 waves of feminism, and he just kept on going. But there's 3. But there's 3.
Yeah, if
See how
there's 4,
stupid
there's
that
also
sounds?
3. That's a point. That's a point I'm
That's
making
a
in terms
really
of logic.
stupid argument.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
There's still 3 if there's 4.
You just
didn't know that?
realize that there was
There's
4
also
waves.
2 and
I
there's
think-
also 1.
Chat. He didn't know.
It
that there
doesn't
was 4
matter.
waves.
It doesn't matter how many. I don't care if there's
history
16
matters,
waves.
but it doesn't matter that there's
No.
4 waves. But the history matters, but it doesn't matter that there's 4 waves.
No,
there was 3, so it doesn't matter that there was 4.
You're not defending your position.
Crazy.
She doesn't even listen.
There's nothing to listen to. Like, you're literally just like, you're
Dude,
just
you literally didn't know that. You said that
endlessly.
you're a relativist.
Yes.
You just said that it's your definition and you're the source of your argumentation.
I'm sorry.
That means you lost the debate because you can't appeal to anything outside of yourself.
That's not true. Again,
Yes, no,
if
that
we
is
want to do
true.
Agrippa's dilemma, you're just falling into dogmatism. Dogmatism's stupid too.
No.
Yeah,
I do
infinite regression
I do
is
internal
stupid too.
critiques. I do worldview
How do you solve
analysis.
infinite regression and dogmatism?
Because I don't
as
believe
in your worldview.
in
How do you solve?
foundationalism.
How do
You're
you
not
solve
even gonna
Agrippa's
understand.
dilemma? How do you do it?
Because I'm not a foundationalist.
All
I'm not
axioms are
subject to-
circular, fundamentally. All axioms.
That's my position. I know.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
So how do
an
you solve
epistemic
that?
holist.
How do you solve that?
By
Doesn't
worldview
that mean that,
apologetics.
like,
So you're
none
not
of these
even
things
listening.
matter.
You're yapping.
It's all circular, anyways.
No, not everything is circular.
How do you solve your dogmatism?
Fundamentals. Why are you yapping if you don't want to know the answer?
I'm just doing what you're doing. I'm not gonna lie. I've put on the clothing of Jay. Okay, I'm performing now. I don't have as good of hair though, or sunglasses. I don't have as good of hair to perform as Jay, or sunglasses.
Okay.
Keep answering. I'll keep doing it. Watch.
So there's a difference between something being circular at a normative level versus paradigm, fundamental, epistemic holism. But that's
Aren't axioms all circular though, Jay? Didn't you just agree to that like 2 minutes ago? See, he's contradicting himself. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. This is crazy. I just won the debate.
Yep. Spurg.
Yeah, I'm doing exactly what you do. That's true.
All right, we have a couple chats. We have Dank Naked with the 50. Thank you for the soup chat. Kat, thank you for the soup chat. We have Lucas again. Yes, dear, what this chatter says, parentheses, yours truly, is indeed true. I'm on my firm's associate hiring committee. I would describe you as a quote-unquote mediocrity, but in all candor, even that would be gross hyperbole. Wow, okay. You response to Lucas or no?
Lucas, does your girlfriend know that you masturbate to bullying women online? Because I don't know if she'd like that.
She might be watching with him. Maybe they both wrote this together.
Maybe.
Thank you, Lucas, for the soup chat. I do appreciate it. We have 2 chats coming in here through Streamlabs. One moment. We have the great, one sec, guys. It is loading. Every day I'm struggling, asks this.
Every day I'm struggling donated $100. Not so erudite. What is the ontology of logic from your worldview? Are ethics universal?
Do you want to respond to
I'm a divine command theorist. I believe that God is fundamentally relative in how he approaches things, and I do my best to use exegesis, eisegesis, and divine revelation to understand what God's will is and to enact that in my life and understand
Pure
others.
gibberish. So there's no such thing as divine command theory that is relative.
Yep, we found one.
Pure gibberish.
Kyla, can I
found
have
one.
you just scoot your microphone to the edge of the table there? Perfect.
Yes.
And then we have Intel Wild. Hold on, let me read this before.
Probably shouldn't read it if you're cringing that hard already.
It pertains to destiny.
And like my sexuality.
No.
Is that relative or is that part of objective morals?
You
Is
know
it
what?
circular when you ask that question, or is it part of like your absolutist positions?
Do you know what you're even
Not
talking
so
about?
bright. What is your opinion on Destiny allegedly recording your good friend having sex without her consent? And why
I mean,
do
it's
you
off topic,
continue to
Intel,
support
but
him?
if you want to.
Yeah, if he did that, it's bad.
Okay. All right. Thank you,
And we-
Intel Wild. Guys, $100 TTS if you want to get a message in here. If you're enjoying the stream, you can also support via Venmo Cash App. They don't take any cut like how YouTube and Streamlabs and apparently also, you guys, do you stream on YouTube at all? Or so apparently, I don't know if you know this. So YouTube takes the 30% cut. You
It's
know
up
that.
to 45% if it's below $10.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Here's the other thing, though. If they're using an iPhone or another Apple device and they use the YouTube app to send it in, Apple takes 30% first. So if somebody donates, for example, they send in a $200 super chat, you're going to be left with $98 of the $200 super chat. So they take a lot, Just, for those of you who support Kyla or you support Jay here, just consider sending it through
Streamlabs.
either Streamlabs or some other method. And then if you're enjoying the stream, guys, like the video. Also, if you guys are watching on Twitch, drop us a follow on the Prime sub if you have one. Thank you, guys. Shall we get back to the debate? We have maybe about another 30 minutes or so.
Sure.
So,
Jay can just pick a word to define and then prattle about it. Actually, could you give me the history of a word?
You asked me for the definition, so
I did.
I don't know what you're talking about, me prattling over the words when you asked for the definition.
I asked for definitions and you
Right.
prattled for 30 minutes.
No,
about
I
the
gave
history.
you definitions connected
Eventually,
to the historical
I helped you
people.
get there.
You
That's
didn't
true.
help. No, you didn't do anything but,
Yeah,
but talk
I
yourself
pulled
into
it out.
oblivion.
I pulled it out of your
You didn't do
long
anything.
litany.
No,
We did it.
So you haven't explained why
Jay,
this
I'm
is
sorry.
a.
Hold on.
I'm going
we've
back
been doing
to the
this.
debate.
We've been circling this.
But
just
you
for
haven't
content, just for content's
Can
sake,
you
let's do
restate
something
what your
interesting.
argument is as to why it's good, other than GDP? Is that your only argument?
I also believe that it is good because I think it is a liberal value to give people freedom
Why
of
are liberal
opportunity.
values good?
I think it leads to the highest level of flourishing within a society.
Okay, so it's a circle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.
All axioms are circular. Good job.
No. They're not all circular.
Yes,
I'm
all
not a
axioms
foundationalist.
are circular.
Right, but I'm not a foundationalist.
Doesn't
so
matter. All axioms are
No,
circular.
not everything. No, listen.
God is good.
How do you know that all axioms are circular?
It's fundamental. It's fundamental to
so
philosophy.
can I just claim that it's fundamental? Does that make it so?
This is like being like, how do you know that?
Correct. Yeah, it's called
that
epistemology.
P is the probability factor. It's like
Yeah, it's called
because
epistemology.
That's what it is.
It's called
I don't know.
epistemology. So what's the justification for that?
For which?
That all axioms are circular.
It's
How do you
because they're
know that?
foundational. They're foundational ideas.
That would mean that they're circular, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a circle. Mm-hmm. So your argument for how you know that is that it's a circle.
I'm saying no. What I'm saying when you refute my claim by going it's circular.
I'm asking you
all
for-
axioms are circular. Also,
How do you
it's,
know that is what I'm asking.
It's foundational. It's just like basic.
Okay, so
it's
do you
basic
understand?
presuppositional
Do you understand?
logic.
And that's not. You don't even know what presuppositions are. No, you
Yes, I
don't.
do.
Because if you can do that in a debate, that means I can do that in the debate. So there's no debate possible. I can just say all of my beliefs and my positions are foundational and axiomatic.
It's almost like I said I could Agrippa trilemma you too, and then it would be stupid.
That's not what we're talking about.
That's exactly what we're talking about. Yes.
Tell me what an epistemic
Typically, when we
justification
engage in
is.
debates, we
What
grab
is an
some level of
epistemic
normativity of
justification?
each other's world so that we can
What
actually talk
is an
about
epistemic
ideas.
justification?
I don't know. Define it for me, Jay.
Well, I thought you knew all about philosophy.
No, you've been teaching
No,
me
you
so
told
much.
me
I don't know
you said you were going to instruct me in philosophy.
I'm really dumb. Just tell me.
You said earlier that you knew philosophy. So what is epistemic
I'm
justification?
pretty sure I never said that I knew philosophy. In
No,
fact,
you did. You said I knew nothing. I knew no fallacies.
I laughed and
that
said
you knew
it's insane to me that you have a philosophy degree, because I'm assuming you know philosophy, but you don't know multiple fallacies, and you unironically are trying to say that the opposite
So you're
of
melting
relativism
down. I'm
is
sorry that you're
objectivism.
having a hard time, but this is how we do debates.
Okay.
What's the argument for feminism other than GDP? And it's just good and it's liberal? Okay. So do you understand that I can then come to the debate and say that it's good because it's not liberal?
Okay, and then I would say, why do you not value liberalism?
You're missing the point because
Why do you not value liberalism?
That's not an argument.
I think liberalism leads to higher levels
I
of
don't think
flourishing
you
based on
actually
every single statistical norm that we have that exists
what?
out there. That's what
So?
I value. I think that when people are
The
doing
fact that
better,
you
when
value
people are
that-
happier, healthier,
Listen,
fuller, better
the
mentally
fact
well,
that you
all
value
of that is
that
good.
doesn't make it an argument. That's the point.
I
That's
believe
your problem.
that God wants us to be happy, healthy,
Just
and
appealing
whole.
to that doesn't do anything for your case.
There is. I'm telling you, Jay. There's nothing I can say that you're not going to
No,
just
you
throw circular
because you're
logic
not
at
making
me.
arguments.
I
Correct.
am
That's
making
what debates.
arguments.
No,
you're
you're
just
not.
unwilling to grant me
Assertions
any level of normativity.
are not arguments.
Okay.
Yeah, in a debate, I'm not going to grant you normativity.
I've made assertions.
Correct.
I've supplied evidence for it, and then you've just gone, oh, it's circular.
No, you're
It's
the
circular.
one that's like losing it and
Nope,
flapping
I've
around.
said GDP. I said flourishing is good because it improves.
Why is that the good?
I believe that it is good because I think
The
overall,
fact that you believe that doesn't make it
because
good.
I think that God wants us to be happy, healthy, whole, and good people, and I think that liberal
But you
societies
haven't demonstrated
produce,
that those things
I
are-
think that liberal societies produce all of those outcomes to the highest level. That doesn't mean that I think that God is a liberal by any means. God is so much more and beyond all of that. But I think by and large, the liberal system
if he
leads to
promotes
the
that,
greatest
then he would
possible
be a
outcomes.
liberal.
God is so much bigger than any label or construct that any human can apply to him. I don't even know why you're saying that.
Because it's a dumb argument. What you're
right.
arguing
It
is
would be a
stupid.
dumb argument for me to apply
your
any
dumb
political
argument.
fucking label to the omnipotent
You
God.
just said that liberal societies are good. That's what you appeal to in terms of divine command theory. So that would make God illiberal.
No, it wouldn't. At all, because I'm sure
Can
you
you
can
think
conceive of a
through
world.
your own
I'm sure you can
arguments?
conceive of a world where God is more than any political system.
Just
My
saying God's
best-
more.
My best
if I
possible
promote
interpretation
something,
of how to engage
if I
in the
promote
world
liberalism,
in a good
then
way.
I'm a liberal.
I don't
So
think
you
that
have
God promotes.
conflicting positions.
I think liberalism strikes as close
That's good
to
that
it.
you-
No, not at all. You're just not engaging with what
You
I'm saying.
literally can't think through your own arguments.
You
This
can't.
is so sad.
You actually can't
You
understand me.
said
or
that
your bad
liberal
faith.
society is what God wants, but God's not
I
a
didn't
liberal.
say that. I didn't
you
say
did
that.
say that.
I said that what God wants is for people to be happy, healthy, whole. And I
That's
think
your liberal society.
And I think a liberal society leads us towards that, the best that we have created so
Then
far.
God wants a liberal society,
No,
and
I'm
God's
sure
a
that
liberal.
God wants something more for us
Oh
than
my
that.
gosh.
But we've,
That's a parts whole fallacy.
No,
you
it's
idiot.
not. No, it's
the fact that he
fucking
wants
not.
it more doesn't
Jay.
mean that he doesn't want the liberalism.
that no, God
You
is not a
can't
liberal.
follow an argument.
No, God is not a liberal. I'm not applying.
Your own position would mean he is.
no,
you idiot.
no, it wouldn't. I
Yes, it
already
would.
no, Jay. I've already said that God is
The
more
fact
than
that he's more doesn't mean that he's not promoting the liberalism that you just argued
Can you
he
summarize?
does.
Okay, Jay, can you summarize my argument in any way?
It's not. There's no argument. It's
Summarize
literal
my argument.
child yapping. It's like
Summarize
a
my
3-year-old
argument. Okay,
yapping out of a
summarize
crib.
then it should be really easy for
There
you to
is no
summarize my
argument to
argument.
summarize.
Summarize it, anyways.
Happy, healthy, whole, flourishing society is liberal, and that's what God wants.
Nope.
Therefore, God's a liberal.
No, none of these are my arguments.
It would follow.
No, it wouldn't.
That's literally what you just said.
No.
You said God wants a liberal society.
I said it's the closest approximation to what I think God wants.
Then
for
he
us.
wants that.
No, he probably wants something more for us than that.
Then it's still part of that. If
No,
he wants
it's not.
more,
It's possible
he's still,
that it's
oh my God.
it's fucking
You don't,
some
so
new
this
system
whole
that will
debate,
make 200
the
years
whole
from
debate,
now.
you've misunderstood what part whole fallacies are. When you go home, I want you to get on your computer and I want you to watch a few talks on what a parts whole fallacy is, because
You
you've
should
made
go
that
home,
multiple times.
And I want you to look up what an ad hoc
but I'm
is,
actually
what a
telling
tu quo
you
pro
how
is,
you would
what
do
a false
better.
analogy
I know you
is,
don't
so that
understand
when
right
you
now because you're in your
weaponize-
emotions,
and you
because
use
you're
ecological
losing it.
fallacy. I'm not losing. You're just not
You're
engaging.
losing
in my argument.
it because you don't know what you're
It's
saying.
just endless. Like if you don't want to engage.
So you
in
would be a
anything that I'm-
better debater if you knew what a parts whole fallacy was. I'm
you
trying
would
to help
be a better
you.
debater
I'm trying to help you.
if you could even slightly engage in my normativity so that we could have a conversation.
I'm not going to grant
But
you that. It's a
instead,
debate.
The way that you think
don't know
that
how
you win a
debates
debate
work.
to basically
I'm not going to
people
grant you normativity
who don't
for
understand
your-
anything about what we're
She
talking
wants me to
about.
grant her position in the debate.
Yes, typically when you engage.
No,
yes,
that's not.
yes,
so
yes,
debates
yes.
work by granting positions. This is
No,
what she thinks.
It engage. You grant one another's normativity framework.
No,
to-
you don't.
Yes, you do.
I don't.
Yes, you do.
I don't
or you,
grant that.
Then you end up at Agrippa's trilemma.
No, you end
Yes,
up at
you do.
floundering and losing
No,
your mind and,
no.
and flaming out.
Why?
Sparking out.
Why
That's
does
why.
God want the world that you want?
I can make that argument.
Make it.
My worldview is coherent. It makes sense.
Why does God want?
All
like,
of history,
what do you want?
All of history has been patriarchal societies in terms of Christian and Old Testament Hebrew revelation. They're
How do you know that God
patriarchal.
wants that though?
By your own argument, you argue that it's divine command theory in the Old Testament.
So
And it's you already admitted it's patriarchal.
What value? What God value is coming out of that?
God, the
specifically?
Father, is a patriarch.
God wants patriarchy specifically.
The Father is
Why?
a patriarch because
Why?
he's a patriarch.
So, isn't that a little circular?
I don't have a problem with circular arguments.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so God wants a patriarchy because he's a patriarch. Therefore, God is good, and patriarchy is good because God
Now
is a
you're just
patriarch.
yapping
God
and
is good.
turning on a bunch of, like, adding a bunch
That's
of
a really
things.
nice circle. See how we can just end up in Agrippa's trilemma together, and it's stupid. So instead,
difference between no,
instead,
you don't
what I do
understand
is
what-
I will just grant you
No,
elements of
that's
your
not
worldview
what I do.
so that we can engage.
I
with
don't.
one another.
I
Yes,
don't
that
grant
is what
those
you do.
things. No,
You-
I'm a presuppositionalist. That means I
Then
don't
this is
grant
why
you your position.
this is probably why you're a really annoying person to debate, and that
No,
you've
that's
been
why I
debating
don't
for 15
lose.
years, but you think that you're
25
You're not
years.
winning. You're not winning by just engaging in Agrippa's trilemma. All you're doing is
You don't
you're-
even understand the debate.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
What's
you don't
Agrippa's
understand
trilemma?
what a paradigm level
Do you know what it
critique
is? Define it
You
for
don't
me.
understand what a paradigm level critique is.
Before I keep going, can you define Agrippa's
You
trilemma
don't
for
understand
me?
what a paradigm level critique is.
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
I'm not going to answer your questions because you don't know what a paradigm level critique is.
Okay, well,
How is any
why
of
would that have
Where
anything
is
to
the
do with
proof
you
for
answering me?
feminism?
What's Agrippa's
Where
trilemma?
is the proof for feminism?
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
Where is the proof for feminism?
I gave you multiple pieces of
So
evidence.
you don't have an
and
argument for
I
feminism?
have multiple
other
pieces
than
of evidence.
No,
Yes,
evidences
yes,
are not arguments.
yes.
An evidence.
Evidences are arguments.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No,
yes, they are.
Evidence is backup arguments, you idiot. An evidence
Yes.
is not an argument.
Yes, you use
Go back
multiple
to school.
premises. Oh my God, you're so
An
fucking
evidence is
retarded.
not an argument, it backs
What's
it up.
Agrippa's trilemma?
An evidence is not an argument.
You use
Evidences support arguments, you moron.
Wow, you're so smart, Jay. You really got
You're
me with
making
that one.
stupid
You really
mistakes.
got me with that one, buddy.
What's the argument for feminism?
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
What's the argument for feminism?
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
What's the argument for feminism?
I've made it multiple times.
No,
What's
you
Agrippa's
didn't. You
trilemma?
gave evidences,
Yeah,
not an
just
argument.
because you don't
you
like
gave
it doesn't mean I haven't
evidences,
made it.
not an argument.
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
You gave evidences, not an argument.
My argument is supplied by the evidences. It is good for society. That's my argument.
And I
because
said,
of
what's the good? That
these
relies
pieces of
on
evidence.
the good, which is what?
Flourishing, happiness, well-being.
And God's a
And some level
liberal.
of, like, sovereignty and safety.
God's a liberal because he wants a liberal
I never
society.
said God is a liberal. I said, of course, God is so much more than anything we could ever apply a construct to because I'm not a fucking heretic. Are you crazy? I would never apply
You
any
don't see the
political
divorce
label.
between those two
I would never
positions.
apply. I'm sorry.
It's like talking to a
God
wall.
is sacred to me. I would never apply a label to God ever about anything.
So
even
he
my
wants a
own
liberal
preferred-
society, but he's not a liberal.
Even my own.
So he wants a liberal society,
he
but he's not a
wants-
liberal.
He wants so much more.
That's
than
a
that.
partial fallacy, you idiot.
That doesn't matter.
Oh, fallacies don't matter. Thank you.
Yeah, when you abuse them incorrectly, yeah, they don't really matter. Do you think that God is any political system? What political system do you think God wants?
Yeah, I think God wants a patriarchy.
Patriarchy isn't a political system. It's a
It
hierarchical
relates
society.
to a political system.
That doesn't matter.
Wait a
There's
minute.
patriarchies in
I
democracies. There's
said a
patriarchies in
monarchy
monarchies.
in the Old Testament.
So God
Israel
wants
was
a
patriarchal.
monarchy.
Yeah, he was
God
a
wants a
patriarchal
monarchy.
deity.
Oh,
Has
really?
Christianity had anything but monarchies
So
for the last
you're
2,000
comfortable
years?
capturing the entire visage of God in a single political system. You're comfortable with that?
Did I say his visage is encaptioned?
You said that
in
God wants a monarchy,
political
so God's a
system?
monarchist?
Correct.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
patriarchalism.
I'm not heretical like that. I don't know what to tell you.
Heretical.
Yes, I would never apply a
I
human
don't. You have
label
no idea
to
what
God.
heresy even is.
Okay. What's Agrippa's trilemma? Do you want to answer it
What
yet?
is an Orthodox Protestant? First of all, the thing that you made up and put in your bio. What is that?
It's a branch of theology that is postmodern, and it more or less tries to
so
engage with the
that's
Bible.
heresy, right?
It's not heresy.
Postmodernism is heresy.
That's not heresy.
Yes, it is.
No.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Christianity.
I'm sorry, it's
Can you
engaging
name
with
any
the Bible
Christians?
in the way that it was
Can you
written
name
by the
any
original
Christians in
writers.
history that were postmodernists?
The original ones, yeah.
Really? Like
Yeah.
who? Paul?
Yeah.
Paul was a postmodernist.
Yeah, to some
so
degree.
a 20th century philosophy that developed out of France.
You don't even know what I
Paul
believe.
was a postmodernist. This is how stupid you are.
Do you know what
have no clue what you're talking about.
So how
You're
did Paul-
a total suit.
how did Paul engage
Did
with the
you
Bible?
think that because you knew destiny and just yapping really fast that you would be a good debater? How could Paul be a postmodernist?
Do you want me to answer? Or
Was
do you want to talk? Okay.
was Paul talking to Derrida? Was he talking to Derrida?
Remember how
Was Paul talking to
words,
Derrida?
just because they weren't invented
You're
yet,
so
doesn't
silly.
mean that you can't
You
apply
have
them
no
to
idea what you're
history.
talking about. Now you're making my argument. Thank
Civil
you for
rights
admitting my
couldn't exist
argument.
because the
Thank
Civil
you for
Rights Act
admitting
didn't
my
exist.
argument 2 hours ago.
No.
Good job. You just lost again.
Wow. This is crazy. I won. He just made weird noises. What's Agrippa's trilemma? You don't know. You're avoiding this because you have no idea.
Your argument
That
for
is so funny.
feminism.
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
What's your argument for feminism? I haven't
made
heard
it
anything other
multiple
than
times.
no. You didn't make an argument. You just
I
said
know
GDP.
you don't like it.
Why is GDP
I've said
good?
way more than GDP at this point.
Why is GDP
What's Agrippa's
good?
trilemma?
What you said? God's a liberal is what you said.
What's Agrippa's trilemma?
Why is God a liberal?
I don't know why you can't answer this.
Why is God a liberal?
I've never applied that. That's your straw man.
Why
of
is
me.
God a liberal?
Why are you straw manning me?
Why is God a liberal?
Why are you straw manning me?
You said that he wants a liberal society.
Nope.
Therefore, he's a
I
liberal.
never said that.
Yes,
You
you
said
did.
that.
Now
Nope.
you're lying
Nope.
again.
Nope.
You
straw
said
manning.
30 minutes ago he
Nope.
wants a
Nope.
liberal society.
No, I said it's the closest approximation to something that God wants for
Then he
us.
wants that.
No, he would want so much more for us.
The fact that he wants more doesn't mean he doesn't want that if he's pushing that. You just argued from divine command theory that's what he wants.
No.
Yes, you did.
No, he wants more than
Yes,
that.
you did.
No.
The fact that he wants more than that doesn't mean that he doesn't want that.
No.
It's part of the more.
Do you think he wants more than monarchy? Or
It
does he end
doesn't
there?
matter to the argument.
Does he end it
So
monarchy?
you can't do a parts whole fallacy.
Does he
It's
end
a
monarchy?
parts whole fallacy.
If you want to do a fallacy game again, tell me what Agrippa's trilemma is.
I'm not answering any of your
Crazy.
objections
It's
or
because he
questions
doesn't.
until you give an argument for
just
feminism.
so you're aware, he just
What
doesn't
is
know what
the
it
argument for feminism
Just
other
so you
than
guys
GDP
know,
and God liberal?
Agrippa's trilemma is really important to understand.
What is-
Anytime a person tries to hit you with this like
What-
circular, like normative, like no
She-
argument you made
You're not
make
even-
makes any sense.
you're not even doing the
what you
debate.
have to hit them back with is essentially Agrippa's trilemma, which is that
She's just
all
repeating
things
what she
can
heard Destiny
fundamentally
say.
Be truly, I
She's
don't
just
think
repeating
I've
some
ever
bullshit
heard-
from Destiny.
I don't think I've ever heard him ever talk
What's
about
the
Agrippa's
argument for
trilemma.
feminism other than GDP and God liberal?
And so when you're dealing with people who
God
just like
liberal.
constantly fall back
God
on
liberal.
circular reasoning and like
God
trying to hit you with
liberal. God wants
like, none of this
feminism.
stuff makes any sense. Agrippa's
What's the
trilemma
ought?
basically points out that every single argument fundamentally at like the foundational level never truly makes sense. There's some level of like ambiguous
Who's up here?
lack of
Who are you talking to
justification.
up here?
I'm
Are you
thinking.
spurging out?
Good one.
There's nobody up there.
Good
What do you-
one.
I'm right here.
Why are you wearing a silly shirt? How come you have to close your eyes? Why do you have floaters
sick
in your eyes?
burn.
Look how
Oh,
stupid that.
sick burn.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's stupid. I'm not saying it's a sick burn. I'm pointing out how silly your behavior is. So do you want to engage in Agrippa's trilemma? Because then you and I can just do turtles all the way down if you want to.
Again,
which is part of Agrippa's
you don't
trilemma,
even
which he doesn't know what it is, and he won't define it. He's just going to run away forever.
I don't accept the infinite regress at all.
Oh, wow. How do you do that?
How do I do that?
Yeah.
I don't have that philosophical system.
Yeah, but how do you solve it?
It's not a problem.
It's not a philosophical system. Infinite regress is not a philosophical system. It's a foundational issue to every single philosophical system.
I'm aware of that. I'm a presuppositionalist. I know how that works.
Right. So there's
That's like my
always a why
specialty.
behind your presuppositions, right?
What does that have to do with this?
That's what infinite
A why?
regress is. Yeah, there's a why
I know what
behind
an
every
infinite
precept.
regress is.
So how
you're
do you
not going to convince anyone in the audience
how do you
that
solve
you're
it?
trumping me here. Because all
You
systems...
say that, but he still won't define
Every
Agrippa's
time I try to
trilemma.
answer, you just keep yapping. You
Yeah,
don't
it's
shut
only
up.
me that's interrupting. You're right.
You don't shut up when you ask the
No, go ahead.
questions. I have a view of apologetics
Mm-hmm.
and debate. Okay, it's epistemic holism. I said that like 10 times earlier, which you didn't hear, it didn't register with you. So I'm not subject to a position that's a foundationalist critique. Okay, I'm not an epistemic foundationalist, so that doesn't apply to me. I don't have that system.
Wow, you've solved Agrippa's trilemma?
Yes, because I'm
Wow.
not in that system.
That's crazy. That's not possible. Just so everyone's
Tell me
aware,
what
that is impossible.
Tell me what a
philosophically.
presuppositional argument is, since you're saying that this is my position. What is it?
A presuppositional argument is where you have like a presupposing of God. Like God is a presuppositional argument. There's some foundational initial cause, and everything kind of comes from
No,
there.
that's the cosmological argument. That's not the presuppositional argument.
Okay, why don't you tell me what it is?
It's just simply an epistemic position that all arguments at root are circular. Not every argument, but foundational commitments in a worldview are circular. So my fundamental commitment to God, or to teleology, or to causation, or to morals or ethics is going to be self-referencing to God. But not all arguments and positions are circular. So the trilemma or the problem or whatever you're giving to me doesn't apply to my position.
How do you solve
as a whole.
dogmatism with that?
All positions are dogmatic, and so
Oh, you're right.
coherentism is the solution that you're looking for.
True. Okay, so you solved dogmatism.
Coherentism is the solution that you're looking for.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can you tell me what that is?
Coherentism would be like something's consistent all the way through.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm a coherentist.
Do I get like a
There
head
you go.
pat?
I'm a coherentist. There's the answer to your question. I'm not a foundationalist.
Gotcha.
You're a foundationalist. That's why I didn't grant you the normativity at the beginning of the debate.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? If he's going to answer for me, then I honestly probably don't need to be here. You could just make my arguments for me. There's no point.
I'm answering your question that you asked me.
You
said, how do I solve these dilemmas?
See,
And I gave you the answer.
Here's the difference, right?
And you just don't like the answer. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just willing to grant you your worldview. I'm fine with it.
I don't do that in debates.
You have to. Otherwise, you end up
You
here.
don't grant a person
Yes.
the commitment.
Otherwise, you end up at dogmatism, and I end up at infinite regression.
That's why I did an internal critique.
Okay.
That has to do with coherentism.
Yeah. The problem
Anyway.
with dogmatism is that it's circular, and the problem with infinite regress is it fundamentally is circular.
All positions are dogmatic at root is what I'm arguing.
Yes,
So it's
I
a
know.
question of coherence.
Which is why you
versus
allow-
incoherence, and why your position is
This is
incoherent.
why you grant some level
No.
of normativity.
No, you don't.
Yes, you
No,
do.
you don't.
You must.
You
And
don't understand debate.
the issue is that my positions are coherent as well. I think
No,
about
they're
them.
not.
Yes, they are.
They're
You
just coherent
don't-
in your head because
no,
they're
you just don't
self-referencing
like
to your
them.
health.
You just don't like
You
them.
literally grounded it in your own subjective
That's not an
appeal.
argument. Why aren't you making an argument?
What?
What do you mean? You're not making an argument.
You appeal to yourself.
What do you mean? That's not true. I'm a divine command theorist. Were you not listening?
You saying that is not an argument. Your
That's
argument
not an
is-
argument either.
That's a tu quoque.
What's your position?
That's a tu quoque.
That's not a tu quoque.
How is it not?
Because a tu quoque is an ad hom based on hypocrisy. I didn't accuse you of hypocrisy.
You said that's your position. You just literally just did that.
She knew that. Oh no,
literally
you used
just
the
did
fallacy
that.
wrong again.
You literally just said that to me.
I'm realizing that to debate Jay, I just have to memorize every single fallacy because I think you used them
Yeah,
all
I'm pretty sure
incorrectly.
debates
you
relate
used
to
false analogy incorrectly. You
No, I
used
didn't.
tu quoque
No,
incorrectly.
you made the false analogy,
No.
you idiot.
No.
You made the false analogy, not
You
me.
engaged in an ecological fallacy.
You made the false analogy. And then you misstated what my argument was because you can't follow
The
it.
key to debating Jay is memorizing lists of fallacies.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the
to point
laws
out
of thought,
when he uses them
the laws of
incorrectly.
thought matter
You
in a
knew that,
debate.
though.
I'm pretty sure.
You knew
I'm pretty
that tu
sure the laws
quoque-
of thought matter in a debate.
Were you
pretty
misciting
sure.
tu quoque intentionally?
I didn't cite it wrong.
Yes, you
I
did.
cited it correctly.
No.
You literally just turned it back and said, well, you do this.
That's not a tu quoque.
Yes, it is.
No, it's
Yes,
not.
it is.
I wasn't accusing you of hypocrisy.
Yes, you did.
No,
you
I
said
didn't.
that I was making the same argument. You were
That's
saying
not a tu quoque.
Yes, it is. You're
No,
calling me
it's not.
hypocritical.
That's not hypocrisy. I'm not accusing you of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy would be if you say one thing and then do a different thing. Like if you're like, don't smoke, and I'm like, but you're smoking, Jay. That would be a tu quoque. Don't smoke is a completely valid argument, regardless of whether you smoke or not.
What you're yapping about.
That's crazy. You just actually cite fallacies incorrectly.
No.
And then you hope that your opponent doesn't know them.
You have a child level understanding of
That's
what
so
the
funny.
definition is at a website.
It's fine, yeah.
And what you did
That's an
was a
ecological
two-quote.
fallacy
So
right
here we
now.
go again. You can't even talk like a normal person.
Neither can you.
You literally lose your mind, rolling your eyes. You're
Where are you
basically
looking right now?
You're
Where are you
basically
looking right now?
having you're basically having like an epileptic episode trying to debate because you can't handle a normal conversation.
So I started very good faith. Where are you looking right now, Jay?
Directly at you.
Why? Why are you doing that?
Because normal people look at people, they don't stare up into the sky and have epileptic episodes.
Oh, yeah, you're right. She's so wrong because you looked into the sky. Got him.
No, you're just yapping and you don't even understand the things you're talking about.
I am literally, I don't know. So, chat, just so you guys realize, what I've done for the last hour is unironically just employ Jay-isms back at him for an hour straight. That's what I've been doing.
So
if it sounds really, really stupid,
her tactic was to
it's
not
because
actually
it is.
debate, but to just mimic
There's
me.
no way to debate
Which is
you
interesting
when you
because
won't- when you
women
are just
basically are
relying on
mimicking
Agrippa's
men.
trilemma.
Women basically just mimic
Yes,
men,
the
and that's
moment
what
that
you did.
somebody,
Because
so
you didn't have an
for the people
actual
who are
argument.
interested, the moment
you're
that
just
somebody just
mimicking
falls
me.
back on like basically circular reasoning and just insisting that you were
I gave you the
incoherent
answers
because
and you
you're
didn't
not
know what they
using
were.
the,
I
like,
said
normative
epistemic.
framework that
I said,
they like.
I said
Personally,
coherence.
there's an impact.
She
There's just
can't
no
even
way to talk
It's
about
like
these
talking
things.
to a
So
wall.
instead, all I opted to do for the last like hour and a half
There's nobody
is
up here.
your behavior.
There's no one over here.
I'm looking at the camera.
But you know, you're looking at the
Jay,
wall.
I don't know why you're so
You're having
worried.
an epileptic episode.
Why are you
I'm sorry.
worried about?
Just
Why
relax.
are you worried about where I'm looking?
Do you need a medicine for the epilepsy, or
Why are you
what's going
worried
on?
about where I'm looking?
It's just funny, like because you can't.
I'm not even sure
You can't
how
have
it's
a
funny
conversation
that I
and
look
look
up.
in the person's eye.
Yes,
and,
when
and
I
make
think,
your argument.
I look up.
Good for you.
Good point. Got him. Destroyed.
What is the argument for feminism other than GDP? Is that it?
I believe that it is good for society because it leads to overall flourishing,
Which was
well-being.
economic liberalism?
Nope. Well-being.
What does that mean?
Well-being typically is measured by like positive mental health, some level of eudaimonic expression, and some level of like self-report of eudaimonic expression. It also leads to things like less missed work, greater social connections, greater access to opportunities, all sorts of things that I think are broadly good for society, leads to better outcomes, leads to happier people. And I think by and large, God doesn't want us to like be punished arbitrarily for no reason. So I think he more or less wants a society that allows us to express in the way that we want to.
Which is a
and
liberal
define him.
society.
There's probably multiple societies that would allow this in the future, not just a liberal one.
Does he want a liberal one right now?
I don't know.
But earlier you argued that it was God.
I hope
wanting
so.
this.
Yeah, I hope so. I believe so.
But now you don't know. You said God earlier, divine command theory. Now you don't know. So
Yeah.
which one is it?
Well, it's both, right? Because I'm
It's
not.
both. I don't know and divine.
Yeah,
divine command
I'm
theory?
not like when it comes to my faith. I try
So
to.
those are contradictions.
Do you want me to answer?
Were you
I-
contradicted?
Well, to some degree, yeah. I think there's a paradox.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's a
So you
paradox.
contradicted,
There's a
thank you.
paradox of faith that you have to hold, where you're
A
simultaneously.
paradox is not a contradiction.
You.
They're two different things.
That's
Did
true.
you know that?
That's true. It's almost like I'm
So
doing a
now
paradox.
you're appealing to a paradox to get out
Do
of
you
a
want me to answer
contradiction?
you? Okay, I'll. Do you want me to answer you?
Please contradict away. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think when it comes to things like my faith, I try to engage in some level of epistemic humility where I both do my best to understand what God wants through divine command theory, through exegesis, eisegesis, and divine revelation. However, at the same time, I maintain a level of epistemic humility of recognizing that I could be wrong about the infinite God, which is why I said, I don't know, but I hope so.
So the appeal to divine command theory actually doesn't work.
No, it does work.
Not to
right?
ground your position.
Sure, it does.
How?
Because I'm using exegesis, eisegesis, and divine revelation to try
Repeating
to
the
understand.
words doesn't mean that it actually works for an argument.
It
So
does work for an
Just
argument.
rattling out the terms.
What's
doesn't-
exegesis?
That is looking at a text and getting out of the text what it means.
And what's
Eisegesis is
eisegesis?
reading into the text.
Yeah, and what's eisegesis?
Eisegesis is reading into the text.
And then what's divine revelation?
all the teachings of Christ contained in Scripture and tradition, in our view.
And I'm sure you would agree that these are typically the three things taught in most theological schools that you should utilize to try to understand what God's will is and what his principles
But
are.
that doesn't mean that you have an argument because you're appealing to what's taught in seminaries. That's what I'm trying to get you to
My
understand.
argument is based on divine command theory, and I use exegesis, eisegesis,
but your
and divine revelation
argument
to try to understand
then
what I think God wants, and then I try to apply that to the world.
Yeah, but
broadly.
I'm telling you why it's not a good argument.
It's coherent, you just don't like
No,
it.
it's not,
Yes,
because
it
you
is.
just said that I don't know if it's right, and so I can't appeal to divine command.
Do you know exactly what God wants in all ways? You just know all of God?
So now it's not divine command theory,
Of course it is.
but you don't know what God wants.
I do my best. Do you think that
Do you know what he wants or not?
I think so, yeah. That's what faith is, right?
You think so?
Yeah.
Was that an argument?
That's an honest response to my
okay, fair enough.
relationship with Christ. Are you
That's
100%
good, but how is that an argument?
confident that you know what God wants?
How is that an argument?
Are you
then?
100% confident that you know what God wants?
My subjective state of confidence doesn't matter about an argument or
Do
not.
you think that you know 100% what God wants?
This is the problem, is that you think that your subjective state of argumentation or
No.
being convinced relates to an argument. It doesn't.
No, not at all. Do you think that you know what God wants?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, so would you say that you're using your subjective state to interpret the world around you?
You think that because everyone has a subjective state that everything is subjective?
Nope, I don't.
Okay, so then there's your answer.
Okay, interesting. So I also would agree that just because I'm using my best interpretation, it doesn't mean that it's subjective, because I'm using things like exegesis. Exegesis is not subjective as much as possible, right? You're using ancient tomes, you're looking at Greek literatures, you're listening to rabbis and the original readers of the language to try to understand what, like, Exodus means, right? That's exegesis. And so that is not subjective. Ideally, the goal is to be as less subjective as
That
possible.
would make my point, that it's not subjective, and so you are appealing to something that you claim to know.
But then eisegesis is reading into it as well, which we
What does
also
that have to do
always
with
learn.
this?
Because that's the level of like self-interpretation
Right.
that every single Christian is doing. In fact, you're doing to try to understand your divine command theory.
What does this have to do with proving your argument?
Pointing
this
out
is
that
how
we're doing
divine-
the same thing.
But that doesn't mean you're getting to the same conclusions or it's a good
You're
argument.
right, we do come to different conclusions. But that doesn't mean that mine is
So
somehow
how does this
incoherent.
relate to your argument?
Because we're using the same thing. And
So what?
So
The use of the thing has nothing to do with the
I'm
argument.
using your own logic to establish why I am being
I
coherent.
want to know your argument.
I've already
You're just saying
stated
that I use these things.
I've already
Good
stated
job. How's that an argument?
It's an
It's
argument.
not.
It is.
Using the things is the argument. No, it's not.
My argument is that feminism is good because it does a number of things, which I've listed
Right.
multiple times.
And you appealed that on the basis of divine command theory,
Why
and
don't-
now you say that I don't know what's
Why
right.
don't we have an interesting conversation and you argue with me about like GDP or like whether it actually leads
Because
to
we're going to
flourishing,
the thing- that's
rather
what
than just like
because
quibbling about like presuppositionalism.
Because it's what your argument's based on. If I undo that, your argument falls. That's why. And it did.
It didn't. You
It
just
did.
don't like it.
No,
We're
you
using,
gave a dumb argument.
No,
You said
we're using
that
the same
I just
system.
read
We're using the
use
same
thing.
system.
How does that help your argument?
Because what it means is that we're both being coherent, but we still end up
I don't
with
have your
different
system.
conclusions.
I don't have your views.
Yeah, you do. You're divine
No, I
command
don't.
theorist.
I don't
aren't you?
have your views.
Aren't you a divine command theorist?
I have a different account of what that means. Do you
You
understand
don't use
words?
exegesis, eisegesis,
Words
and divine
mean
revelation?
different things in different systems.
Do you not use these three things to understand the
Using
will of
them
God?
has nothing to do with whether that backs up your argument.
Interesting. So you will agree that
So
basically
she
you're
thi-
doing the same thing as me to
You
build
think
up
the
your
use of a
presuppositions,
thing-
but somehow my presupposition
the use
is
of a thing-
incoherent, but yours is super coherent.
How does the use prove that your conclusions are correct?
It doesn't.
Thank you.
But
Thank
it doesn't prove yours
Thank
either.
you.
It doesn't prove yours either. That's the problem.
Even if it doesn't, it means that your argument doesn't prove feminism.
And your argument doesn't prove anything either because of
You're
Agrippa's
here to defend
trilemma.
feminism.
You're here to prove that patriarchy is good.
If you failed in your argument, then you've lost.
You have to prove feminism's bad. You have to do the same thing.
by you just giving a
No,
bad
you didn't
argument.
give any arguments.
I did that.
What was any of your presuppositions
All
for
I
any
have
of
to
these
do
things?
is internally critique you and let you flounder and refute yourself, and then no one has.
That's not an argument, though. That's
It
not a
is.
debate. It's not
The
a
argument
debate.
is
No, it's not. It's not
critiquing
interesting
you.
in any way.
I don't care if it's
All
interesting.
that's going to
Your
happen
subjective-
is that like your desperate
your
fans are going to be like,
subjective
man, this
idea
guy
of
said
what's
things I
interesting-
liked, so she's right.
This is why you're yelling and melting down, is because
You're
when you
also
got
yelling
precepts,
and melting down, Jay.
because you can't talk, you can't listen. I have to talk over you because you're
Ditto.
losing here. You didn't give an argument.
I've given an argument
No, you
so
gave
many
uses. Your arguments are not arguments; they're assertions.
times. Okay, Jay.
Gotta let some chats come through. We're about at the 2-hour mark, so we'll get the closing statements in just a bit. The TTS has been lowered. We're gonna do a roast session if you want. $69 TTS, streamlabs.com/whatever if you want to get a roast in. Also, be sure to stay tuned, guys, as we're winding down this debate. Kyla here is sticking around for another debate. We have Jim Bob in studio. I think we're going to go live in about an hour and a half. We're going to break for a bit. Let me let these chats come through. We have Chef Dill Pickles. Thank you for that.
Chef Dill Pickles donated
Thank
$100.
you.
Did not so bright ever kick that wine habit? She's slurring tonight, but none of her arguments have improved.
Wine drinker?
Nope, not
No
really.
wine? Okay. We have Silent here with a $100 super chat. Thank you so much, Silent, for your $100 blank super chat. Thank you so much, man. Lucas follows up on his previous super chat. Yes, my wife is actually watching me bullying you online and always watches whatever with me. She's quite entertained. That said, you call it bullying. I just see it as calling a spade a spade. Sorry, truth can sometimes be disquieting. You want to do a quick response to that, or?
There's nothing to respond to. Like,
Okay.
yeah, me and my wife both enjoy being mean to women online. Like, you're welcome for the foreplay, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Lucas. Always good to see you in the chat. Thank you, thank you. We have Christopher Scott here with a message. Thank you, Christopher.
Christopher Scott donated $100. Wait, did she just God's a relativist? He approaches things. What nonsense is that?
Any response?
Yes, I said that God is a relativist. You can just like look through
Thank you.
scripture and
So
see that he
you
like
just
is constantly
totally
saying.
refuted yourself.
For example, there's
Thank you.
multiple verses where he says like things that were wrong back then or weren't wrong back then were not wrong because they didn't understand.
That
and
doesn't
he
make God a
often
relativist.
Yes, he regularly
That
updates
does
law.
not-
That is what
that's so
relativism
silly.
is. Yes,
That
it
does
is. It
not
is
make
absolutely
God-
relativism. It's understanding
No,
people
it's
within the
not.
context of where they are and applying rules
That's
based
not
on
relativism.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. That does
it
not
is.
make God a relativist.
Yes,
You
it
were
does.
indoctrinated with postmodernism, and that's why you thought St. Paul was a postmodernist. So you don't have a clue what you're talking about.
that. Okay, good job.
All right, we have another chat here. We have Grid One, big Grid One. Thank you, man. Oh, there it is.
Grid One Motorsports donated $200
Yo, thank you, man. Good to see you in the chat.
Erudite, it is super interesting to watch you try and walk the line trying to claim patriarchy and feminism are not at odds, when feminism has its space in the destruction of patriarchy.
Yep.
Yeah, I just think that when feminists do that, it's harmful. I don't think that patriarchy by itself is bad, but I do think that patriarchy that like is enforced is bad. And so like feminism is at its root trying to block the obstacles by which we make patriarchy a necessity rather than like allowing patriarchy to emerge naturally.
So another way to show that she lost the debate is that her position is unfalsifiable, because anytime it gets challenged, she can redefine the terms to be whatever it needs to be at that moment. And if you go back and watch the debate, she did that multiple times.
I've used
and
the
that's why
exact
feminism,
same definition
but the definition was
entire time.
broad enough to fit this.
It
critique
wasn't
that I
actually
made.
broad enough.
It is
and
broad.
again, if
That's-
you didn't like
thought
it,
that, you thought
if you
ancient
didn't
Israelites
like it, Jay, you
you
shouldn't
thought
have agreed
ancient
to it.
Israelites were feminist.
Yeah, to some degree. For their
Feminism is a historical movement, you goober.
Again, just
A
because
modern movement.
Do you think that trans people only existed after we made up the word
feminist
trans?
movement is what's being debated. Not
It's
our.
not. It's literally not. It's
It
feminism.
is. No, I'm pretty
it's a
sure
concept.
the title
It's a concept.
is feminism, right?
It's a concept. It's not. Is the feminist movement
The feminist
good?
movement is what I'm debating.
That's not what I came here to debate. The question is
that's why
feminism good?
you did come to debate feminism.
Do you think that trans people only began to exist after the word was invented? That was the only time that trans people now exist?
Feminism is the thing that we're debating, which is a historical movement.
Do you think that like any
You already
concepts
admitted
don't
that it-
exist until we
you already
invent the
admitted it's a
word for
historical
it?
movement.
Like crocodiles
You already
weren't real
admitted.
until we made the word
You
crocodile.
already admitted in the debate it's a historical movement.
Of course, it's a historical movement
Thank
that
you.
just has nothing to do with anything because feminism
So
is
now
also
again,
a concept.
for the fourth time, you contradict yourself because you said that the history does
As a great man
matter.
today said, a word can mean two different things. Feminist as a movement is not what I'm here to defend. Feminism as a concept is.
You admitted an hour ago that the movement is necessarily bound up with the history, you idiot.
That has nothing to do with the.
Thank you.
No,
so
that
now
has
you've
nothing.
lost again for the
No.
10th time the
No.
debate.
Again,
Good, great.
if you desperately need all of history to define a concept, that's fine.
For historical concepts, yes. Like
No.
movements, like social movements that come out of the French Revolution.
So a movement can create a concept, and then the concept can then be retroactively applied to other instances that you saw in history.
It's not
this
retroactively
is absolutely
applied.
True.
This is why Paul's not a postmodernist, you moron.
This is why we can call things liberal democracies before the word liberal democracy existed. This is why
Paul is not a postmodernist.
This is why,
You're
for example,
an idiot.
This is why, for example, we would say that the founding fathers created a democracy, even though they didn't invent the word democracy yet. You can retroactively apply concepts.
You can't.
Yes, you can.
Paul is not a
Yes, you
postmodernist.
can. I'm sorry.
Paul is not a postmodernist. This is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
He engaged with the Bible. He engaged with the Bible the same way that I did, which is a postmodernist
a stupider
approach.
statement than that.
That's
that is
because
the dumbest thing I've ever
you
heard.
don't even know what I think, Jay.
You have blabbered the most insane spaghetti splash diarrhea nonsense
what is
on the
Protestant?
wall.
What is Orthodox Protestant? What is it? What's radical orthodoxy?
I don't know what you've made up.
Shut your mouth!
So you're just admitting now that you don't even know
I'm
what
supposed to know your made-up Protestant
you're
position?
attacking me for it, so you should, probably have an idea of what it is.
It's gibberish. It's made-up nonsense. There is no such thing as your made-up radical Protestant orthodoxy. I have no idea
radical
what that is.
orthodoxy just is a
I don't know
theological
what
branch.
your position
It just
is.
is a theological branch. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm supposed to know her position in
You
the
could
debate.
ask me and then engage with me based on
I don't
it.
care about your crazy position.
Then why are we debating at all? Why are you here?
You came to defend your position.
You came to defend your position as well.
And you haven't given an argument for feminism.
I have given an argument for feminism multiple times. If you want to keep laughing about the Paul postmodernist thing, you can just ask me what I mean by that. But you don't want to. You just want to be bad faith. You just want to be bad faith and then blabber on so that your audience can be like,
it's such an absurd statement.
Yeah,
And
this guy's winning.
But it explains how.
Because he keeps saying that he's winning.
It explains how you're able to read back into
Jay,
history all these positions that don't
I know
exist.
that you're smarter than this, which means that I know that you're being bad faith right now. And there's nothing that I can do in a conversation other than be bad faith back. There's nothing. We're at an impasse.
Just keep talking. It's convincing everybody my position, please.
All right, let me let the chats come through. We have Nolly, looks like bought something at shop.whatever.com. She bought a hoodie. Thank you so much. Or maybe it's a guy. Thank you, Nolly. Appreciate that.
Down.
Giovanni. Thank you.
Giovanni Jade, you donated $100.
Thank you, Giovanni.
You are absolutely a heretic erudite. This would have been way better if Jay in good faith pushed erudite's understanding of Christianity with an intention to correct her.
Well, the debate wasn't Christianity, the debate's feminism. So
Yeah, that would be stupid. Also, just want to be clear, as a Christian, you should be really, really... So I think that what he's applying to one thing is heretical. I don't think that Jay is a heretic. And as a Christian to Christian, you should be really, 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 really cautious when commenting on the state of people's salvation, just in general. And I'm sure you would agree with this. I'm not at any point going to say that I think Jay is or isn't saved. Somebody saying that I'm an outright heretic is essentially implying that I'm going to hell.
213 donated
thank you,
$100.
KK. Appreciate it.
She keeps bringing up the trilemma. You can keep asking, but he's asking for evidence to back up your claims. At equals asserting a belief, someone then asking why, and why you believe that, and so on.
Yeah, so we did that, and I gave reasons why, and then I started getting into evidence, and then he said, evidence isn't arguments. So then we circled all the way back up.
Well, you know it's not, right? You know that an evidence is not an argument?
Yep, and so we circled back up to my thesis, and then I proceeded to my thesis, and then I outlined my arguments and evidence again, and then he said, that's not an argument, that's evidence. And so we circled back and back and back, because Jay can't actually engage with a concept. He has to just constantly attack basically semantics.
I'm going to tell you this one time, and I'm not ever going to say this again. Tampons do not exist.
That one's true, actually. He's cooking with that one.
Okay, there you go. We have Clethap. Is it going to come through? One sec. There it is. Thank you, Clethap. Appreciate it.
Clethap donated $100. If NSC believes ancient Israel was a feminist society, would she be happy with us moving to their gender norms? If not, doesn't this demonstrate Jay's point that her definition is too broad?
Quick response to this?
Yeah, I don't believe that Israel was broadly a feminist society. I think that it had more levels of feminism that I was talking about than other societies around it. But by no means would I encapsulate that as
That's not feminism.
Yes, it is.
Feminism
is
not
a
women.
push. Feminism
No,
is an action. It is a movement towards empowering women, which is
It's
what
a
I said the
historical
entire
movement.
time.
It's not an ancient Israelite movement.
That, again, you can apply words that were invented later historically, which is why we can say the founding fathers
No,
invented a liberal
you
democracy,
can't.
even though they
No,
didn't use
you
the
can't.
words back then. Yes,
No, you can't.
You can. I'm sorry.
In this case,
you are
you cannot.
fundamentally wrong about
No,
this here.
you cannot.
You absolutely can. And if you won't do
That's
that,
why it's
you're
an
just being
ambiguity
retarded.
fallacy, because you can make the position unfalsifiable.
I'm not making it
If that's the case, I could say that everything in history is patriarchy.
All you have to do,
because history
all you
was
have to do-
patriarchal.
all you have to do to dismantle my argument is prove how
I already
feminism
did that
doesn't
with
empower women. That's
no.
all you could do. You
No,
could do that.
The
Yes,
internal
you could.
critiques already did that, which you
No.
didn't even understand.
Nope. Again, you just all you did
Just
is
say
rely.
no.
You're like,
Yeah, just
I'm
say no and it makes
I'm just
it
gonna
no.
have a meta conversation.
Just for sake of
instead.
time, just got to move it on though. But Grandma's Sweaters, thank you for this
donated
message.
$100. I don't mind women in the workforce.
Thank you.
It's not inherently bad. The fundamental issue is feminism also divorces God and God's reps, trad males, which leads to polarization and societal conflict for GDP.
What?
I see a question mark
Which
at the
leads to
end there, but I don't know if this
polarization.
is.
And societal conflict for GDP? Did they mean God at the end there? I don't know how. I don't know how societal conflict leads to problems with GDP. I'm not really sure.
Grandma's Sweaters, if you want to send in a clarifying message, you can. We have
Add $100.
Intel Wild.
Intel Wild donated $69. Not so bright is a miserable woman on the inside. She is also a degenerate, woke, pig snake, Kuma gremlin.
What is a Coomer Gremlin?
I don't know.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
But I have a feeling that if I had an OnlyFans, this guy would be subbed to it for sure.
He would be subbed, okay.
sure.
All right, Intel Wild.
I don't have one, and I would never will, but
Nick donated $69.
Thank
I have
you.
one. People can go to my
Erudite had
OnlyFans.
some humility.
yeah.
She could
J.
learn
Dyer,
a lot from
OnlyFans.
this.
It's me in yoga pants.
News
That's
up
it.
to J. Dyer.
All right,
doing
there you
yoga
go.
or just standing around.
Just standing. I don't know how to do yoga.
All right, we have Inquisitor Zeal coming in here in just a moment with a message. If you want to get your own in, $69 TTS, streamlabs.com/whatever. If you want to get a little message in here
Inquisitor
at the
Zeal
end.
donated $100. It took 2 hours, but she finally said, God wants a society that allows us to express in the way that we want to. Her God is individualism, just like every feminist, which destroys civilization.
Agreed.
Five more coming in.
Absolutely
Wait, are you
correct.
opposed to
Spot
individualism? This is not.
No.
This
I
is
don't
just a
think it's
straw
the
man of my
highest-
worldview.
I don't think it's the highest value in society.
Of course, it's not the highest, but are you opposed to individualism?
Again, that's an ambiguous term. Depends on what you mean.
So you just won't answer the question. Okay.
No, it's literally an ambiguous term. Just
Words,
like most of,
don't like them. Can't do it.
again,
Okay.
100 IQ maybe.
Yeah.
Mac, thank
Mac
you.
donated
Thank you, Mac.
$69. Although I agree what Jay, this debate was kind of unwatchable due to the constant childish mocking. Having said that, Erudite should have let Jay give the definition in his terms.
My Jesus
Hey.
fucking Christ.
I give
I would have
heated
loved.
debates.
I would have loved for Jay to just define his words. That would have been amazing. I agree. Honestly, Mac, true. Jay, you should have defined your words if you didn't like my definitions. Holy shit.
Why would I define your
Because
words?
you rejected mine.
Yeah, but debates are for you defending your position. It's not for me defining the words for you.
If you don't like my definition, then you should supply your own.
I don't have to supply your position.
Then there's no point in talking after that. If I say feminism
just
is
don't
this,
understand what a debate is and how
if
it
I say
works.
feminism is this, and you go, I reject that, then the onus
I'm
is on
going
you
to
to
let you
supply a
make your
different
mistakes in a
definition.
debate. I'm not going to make them for you. I'm not going to help you in a debate. I'm going to let you define things in a dumb way and then call you out later. That's how
do
debates
you
work.
have a debate about feminism if you won't supply a definition and you won't engage with my definition? How do we even talk about feminism?
You don't understand how debates work. That
I do.
I'm arguing the position against your position. That means you define it and you defend that.
So I defined it, the concept,
Yeah,
and then
I
you,
let you make the mistakes.
and then you didn't like it, which is fine.
No, I said that it was inconsistent later on.
No, you said it was too broad later on.
Because you moved the
Not
goalpost.
inconsistent. I didn't move the goalpost.
You
I
did
kept
because
it
you
the
tried to
same.
make ancient Israelites
Because
feminist. That's moving
I
the
said it was
goalpost.
feminist
I got
for its
another
time.
one
Yes.
coming in here. We got Klain.
$69.
Thank you, Klain. Appreciate
Is
it.
feminism bad? Name one society where it would work that wasn't in a Wonder Woman movie. I'ma go have a steak.
Good to see
Be
you,
back
Klain.
to watch her get demolished by Jim Bob. Wrong time of the month to have her on.
Do you want to do a quick response to the first question?
Feminism is not like a societal hierarchy system. Maybe you're talking about matriarchies, but matriarchies are broadly not that successful. I don't.
All right.
So it's not useful to talk
We got
about.
Jordan. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it.
$69.
Thank you.
Please grant my definition of good in the Is Feminism Good debate. Sad.
Exactly.
Oh
That
my
you would come to a
Jesus.
debate and think that people grant you the positions that you're defending is
All I'm
why you
learning-
lost this debate.
All I'm learning is that Heidegger.
You're learning that
losing in
you
his
don't know
grave.
how to debate.
No,
is what
I'm
you're
learning that you literally don't want to define words because that way you can pretend to win by just
No, I let
whining
you.
about
I let you
words
hang yourself.
the whole time.
I let you hang
You
yourself.
literally didn't.
I let you hang
acted,
yourself.
You acted like a
If
petulant.
you misdefined the words,
I didn't.
and
You
moved the
didn't like it.
goalpost.
Nope, I didn't do that either.
You
didn't
did. You
like-
said ancient Israelites were feminists because they had
based
women.
on my definition.
Because they had a high view of women.
Yeah, because I defined it as like
That's
an
not
action word.
Feminism, the movement that we're debating, you
Then
goofus.
define feminism differently, and we can quibble about that.
That's the historical movements I mentioned.
Okay, yeah, there we go, Jay. As long as I quibble about words, then I can pretend I won.
Got D's Nates.
Donated
Thank you.
$69. To anyone who thinks whatever
Oh.
only brings on dumb women, I present to you Jay. I love whatever. I love Andrew. I hate Jay. She tried to be good faith. He wanted to be nothing but bad faith.
I guess I got to retire. No more debates for me ever again. I'm retiring.
There
I
it
mean,
is.
I think our debate could be like you're actually such a smart person and you're so informed. We could
No,
have,
you just don't understand debate. Literally, like I'm doing a debate at this level, and you're debating
I'm sorry,
right
you're
here.
right. I should never be good.
No,
with
you just don't know
I
what we're
always
talking
forget.
about. Literally, it's too childish.
What
Like,
I was
it's
saying,
too
Jay,
childish.
I don't know
You're
if you've heard
You
this.
shouldn't debate. I'm trying to tell you right now.
I was
shouldn't.
giving you a compliment and saying it would have
Yeah,
been.
but I'm helping you and giving you a compliment by saying you should not debate.
That's not a compliment.
It is.
It's not a compliment.
Because you're
to
good
say
at
that
other
I'm dumb.
things.
Like what, Jay?
Not debating.
Okay. What I was saying, Jay, if I could just finish this thought, is that I was actually looking forward to a really interesting discussion because I think you are really philosophically grounded out, and I think it could have been interesting, but instead you wanted to quibble over words and just like do dumb like gotchas that are meaningless, and
No,
therefore
they're
we
not.
didn't put forward any
No, the
interesting...
debate's happening at a level that you're
Or
not
interrupt me
understanding.
instead. Yeah.
All right. We have Get Back in the Kitchen.
Get back in the kitchen. Woman
Says-
donated $69. I am asking the most important question we men want to know. Woman, what sandwich do you make the best and most often? Also, evidently the new pope is a woke ass bag. Tell Catholics.
What is your favorite sandwich to make, I guess?
Probably just like a panini with like
Panini.
lots of meat and cheese, high protein.
There
Love
you
the
go.
protein.
We got Shaw here. Shaw. Thank you.
XD donated $69. Jay, love the Miami Vice look, brother. Erudite. Something something. Good try. Looking forward to JB dog walking you.
Oh, Jim Bob. Okay. And then, guys, we're going to do, if you want to get one, couple more in, last call on the TTS roast, that's streamlabs.com/whatever. I'm going to let this one come in. Then we're going to do closing statements and then get this
Giovanni
wrapped.
J. donated $70.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Jay would agree that the OT patriarchs were Eastern Orthodox and worshipped the Trinity, even though that concept as we understand it didn't exist. Can absolutely retroactively apply newer concepts.
Giovanni, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Oh, interesting.
So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have each of you give a up to 5-minute closing statement. Kyla, you'll go first. Jay, you'll go after her. Go ahead.
Sure. Since we basically didn't actually talk about the topic today, which is unfortunate, I guess I would say debates are like this thing that I love a lot. It doesn't mean I'm perfect or awesome at them necessarily, but they're supposed to be this Socratic thing where we engage in trying to find better ideas and better truth, essentially. And you do that by being good faith to some degree, by allowing and granting certain norms of one another and engaging with one another in their thought, and not just like constantly falling back to like whining about words and just like basically just trying to insist that your opponent makes no sense based on almost nothing at all, but like whining about words, just like semantic arguments, which is unfortunate because I think that this could have been a really meaningful conversation. I think feminism as like a concept can be really valuable, and I defend it a lot, but I'm extremely critical of the feminist movement, which I make a distinction from. Maybe that would have been helpful if I made that more clear. Probably not, actually. The feminist movement has been full of lots of pretty bad gender opportunists, which is unfortunate. A lot of civil rights movements get hijacked by bad actors. And I think as a result of it, it's left a lot of men with a bitter taste for feminism in their mouth. And to be clear, I don't think most men should be feminists. I think women should be feminists because it's about women. And I think when women lie and pretend that it's about both genders, it's cringe and stupid. Overall, I think a society that gives women more options and choices, so long as they're not harming others, is a good society and tries to incentivize good behavior. I think it leads to better flourishing. I think it leads to happier people. And I want a world that goes towards these things. What Jay wants is a world where he can yell at everyone from the top of his crown-wearing throne about words and tell them that they don't know anything that they're talking about, and then agreeing that they basically have the exact same type of like coherent presuppositional system, but then insisting that you're stupid and wrong and don't know anything because he essentially disagrees with my worldview without ever actually dismantling why I'm wrong about like GDP for women. He just literally couldn't even engage with that. Maybe he doesn't know what the word GDP means, but he's smart, so he probably does. I'm not actually sure. We could have had an interesting discussion. Instead, Jay robbed you of that for I'm not really sure, and then he's going to end this by insisting that he won because he caught me in all these contradictions while also just like misquoting fallacies. And I guess to liberals, pro tips, when you debate people like this, you unfortunately just like have to be bad faith, and it just turns into like annoying dunk sessions where you are mean to each other, and that's all you can basically do, which is unfortunate because I think we could have had a better discussion. And people don't win because they say the things that you like. They win because they engage in better ideas, and this unfortunately didn't happen. I don't think anyone won. I think everyone lost, including the viewers. So sorry about that, guys.
All right, Jay, your closing statement.
I don't know if that was a diary entry or was that a closing statement, because it sounded like a diary entry. But yeah, so I mean, feminism is not beneficial to society. I laid out my case why, both historically and in terms of, especially not in terms of scripture and divine revelation, which she claims to agree with or believe in. I mean, Paul says to Timothy that women should not teach, women should not be an authority in the church. The church is a historically patriarchal institution. We don't have women preachers, women ministers. And so women have a degree of rights, or we could say their dignity is because they're made in the image of God, just like men. But that does not translate into equality of roles. And of course, the New Testament is abundantly clear about that. As I said, when Paul tells Timothy that women are not to preach or teach, but should be in subjection and should be silent, especially in the religious realm. So most of what she argued for today was her own subjective relativist positions that she wants, that she thinks that eisegesis and exegesis back up this idea that because God is bigger than the idea of modern liberalism, even though he's willed modern liberalism, that's what's good for society. She equivocated multiple times. She committed multiple fallacies throughout the discussion. I never heard an exact clear argument as to why we ought to choose feminism. She spent the first 45 minutes talking about how oughts are not relevant here because this was pragmatic. No, I think if you know about debates are about making the argument from an epistemic, justified, true belief position. That's what epistemology is. It's concerned with justified, true belief. And I asked for that at least a couple times in debate. I never got that. So I don't think that any of us heard any compelling arguments other than just GDP. Well, GDP is not good enough to show us why we ought to have this position or this ideology unless GDP is somehow the highest good or the best thing that we should shoot for. So that's precisely why in the debate I kept asking for what her basis for the good is. She didn't want to talk about that. She said that was a meta discussion and it was a circular discussion, all these deflections away from the fact that everything that she argued for, she based on a thing that was subjective. That would make ultimately her arguments subjective, and thus she lost the debate. So I don't think we heard any convincing arguments for feminism, and in fact, I think we heard that a better case for patriarchy from her own position because she claims to be a Christian. And clearly, feminism and Christianity are absolutely antithetical unless you think Paul was a postmodernist.
All right.
This is a
thank
picture
you, Jay.
of me and Jay being friends.
Oh, there you go. That's very good.
There you go.
Very talented.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both for joining me today for this debate. It was certainly a lively one. I guess that would be a good way to characterize it. We do have one last chat that looks like it's made its way through.
Did we make the...
We didn't.
Intel
we
Wild
didn't. Maybe for Jim Bob's
$69.
show. Thank you, Intel Wild.
WJ.
Appreciate it.
You were brilliant today as always. Not so bright. Talk to your daddy Destiny next time for the proper talking points.
All right.
I'm telling you, he's subbing to my OnlyFans if I have one.
Oh, wow. Intel Wild. All
I don't
right.
have one, but I see you.
Well, guys, if you enjoyed this stream, if you enjoyed this debate, we have one right after it. We're going to take about 30, 45-minute break in between. Kyla will be debating Jim Bob, who you've seen before on the show, and that'll be great. So be sure to stay tuned. Mods, if you can spam the link for that, I'm going to spam it in the chat too. Also, we're going to just do an auto redirect, so if you guys want to just make sure you head on over to the waiting room for that live stream. It's on our channel, youtube.com/whatever. And let me just double check, make sure we're all caught up with everything. Oh, we have one more chat here coming in. And Lucas says this. Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate it, man.
$69. Not so erudite, aka the female reincarnate of Christopher Hitchens, or better yet, Gore Vidal.
I don't know if that... Depending on how you feel about those two people, that's either a really big compliment or an insult, and I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, is it a
I like them.
Christopher
I like those
Hitchens,
people.
pretty sharp guy,
Yeah,
I
he's
guess.
amazing.
So.
Yeah, I'll take it as a
All
compliment.
right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you guys enjoyed the debate. Once again, be sure to stay tuned. We're doing one right after this, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So let me just double check, make sure we're all good. Guys, like the video on the way out if you enjoyed the stream. Also, if you're watching over there on Twitch, we'll be back up on Twitch, twitch.tv/whatever. Drop us a follow and a Prime sub if you have one. And let me just make sure we have no other chats that just came through. No, we are all good. Okay, 07's in the chat. 07's in the chat. We will see you guys shortly. See you guys.